The whole place erupted the moment the successful Yuri Primrose arrived. Everyone was shocked by the success she had achieved from scratch after leaving her family. Even the men were talking about how she had made it into the top 10 richest people in the empire. They sized up the elegant lady, remembering she was once the #1 person on their list. The other ladies looked at her jewel-encrusted dress, green with envy. Yuri smiled back at them, letting them know that everything she wore was genuine. She added that her cosmetics company was doing incredibly well, even becoming an official partner of the Imperial Guild. Noticing a lady with dry skin, she suggested she buy some of her face cream. The girl blushed, but thanked her and apologized. She tried to belittle Yuri's knowledge, but Yuri had been learning business since she was a child. All this time, they had never given her a second glance, seeing her only as Lillica's uninteresting older sister. If she had said these things before, they would have judged her, but now she had finally made them see her in a new light. Since childhood, she had an older brother, Jixin, and a younger sister, Lillica. She was the illegitimate daughter, yet she received all the affection, overshadowing Yuri. People always compare them because Yuri was so introverted, even a bit dull. People always relish stories of sisters with opposite personalities. Yuri was neglected by her family for a long time, but she never gave up hope. She had an ability that could bring any plant back from the dead. At that time, society was beginning to panic about lead in cosmetics. Her ability allowed her to create all-natural cosmetics, and so this ugly duckling finally found a way to use her talents. Almost in the blink of an eye, she became the market leader. She was once a nobody, but her ability made everyone look at her in a new light. At the ball, her popular younger sister suddenly rushed up to her, anxiously asking why she hadn't written a single letter. She started rambling on about how worried she had been. Lillica was annoyed that she had cut ties with the family and was dressed so extravagantly. Before this, Yuri had sold the diamond necklace her father gave her. She replied that she wanted nothing to do with the ducal house of Primrose. Lillica asked why she was treating her family this way. She put on a hurt expression, saying she was wrong to expect her sister to change. Yuri looked at her and realized that the one who hadn't changed all along was herself. Lillica always played the victim, as if she were just a helpless child being bullied by the legitimate daughter. She built that image by scheming behind Yuri's back. Their father stood in front of Lillica, demanding to know why Yuri was treating him this way. He knew she didn't like him much, but he still couldn't tolerate her behavior. The man said she couldn't just turn her back on her family like this. He held out his hand, offering to escort her from the hall. Yuri's brother suddenly appeared by her side and asked her to dance. The girl immediately refused him, and he was angry. Lillica's fiancé turned to Yuri and asked her for a dance, even though they weren't on good terms. Yuri's father and brother immediately confronted him, wanting to know what he thought he was doing. The girl smiled, watching how money could twist people's hearts. Before, they would only yell at her to defend Lillica. Her own father had even tried to get rid of her because his daughter wouldn't listen. She didn't understand how they could talk about making amends after everything that had happened. They reminded her of vultures, completely shameless and without a shred of decency. She decided to end this bizarre farce, saying she had already promised the first dance. When she introduced her dance partner, they all turned pale with shock. She held the man's hand with a wide smile and told them to say hello. Her family had definitely not expected her to choose this man. Yuri sighed in utter annoyance and told them to stop bothering her. She clearly remembered how she died, and it was all thanks to her family. Her father had placed a cup in front of her, saying he didn't want to get his own hands dirty. She couldn't believe her own father was handing her poison and calling him mercy. Yuri started to think that it would be better to join her mother than to live like this. Finally, she steeled herself and took a large gulp of the poison. Immediately, her body trembled with violent coughs. Her brothers stood there, saying their father was too merciful to let her die like this. He thought she should have been tortured for everything she had done. The father told him to watch his words, as she was still his sister. The brother thought to himself that now, nothing could harm his family or Lillica. Yuri lay frozen on the floor, trying to understand how her life had turned out this way. She saw the look in their eyes, telling her she was just trash. Yuri's life ended in tragedy, betrayed by her lover and killed by her own family. She didn't understand why she hadn't run away from them as she had originally planned. She had tried to run away before, but that man had stopped her. She had loved him so much that she had even agreed to be his bride. In that moment, she realized that no one in this world loved her. The only one who had was her mother, who had died in a true tragedy. She had always loved Yuri sincerely and protected her with all her might. As a child, she could forget everything in her dear mother's arms. Now, she struggled on the floor in agony, unable to believe her life would end this way. She stared ahead, wondering if this was really her end. Helpless, Yuri could only wait for her eyes to close. The moment she lost consciousness, all her memories came flooding back. Once, she had been sitting in a cafe, talking about a popular romance novel. The book was about falling in love with an abandoned princess named Lillica. In the book, Lillica became a member of a ducal family, transforming from a common girl into a noble. At first, they looked down on her, but she won them over with her kind heart. The novel told the story of how Lillica defeated her evil older sister. Although the book seemed a bit cliché, the plot was actually quite good and carried a positive message. Yuri Primrose was the typical villainess who suffered the consequences of her own jealousy. Only now did she realize that she had been trapped in Yuri's body all along. It wasn't until the moment of her death that she realized she had entered the body of the novel's villain. She should have known what would happen the moment Lillica appeared at the door. Yuri, oblivious to her potential death, had simply tolerated Lillica's nonsense because of a seriously flawed plan. Yuri's father and brother ended up hating her and falling in love with Lillica. Soon, they all switched sides and began to hate their own daughter even more. Even her fiancé abandoned her, got involved with Lillica, and then broke off the engagement. Now she understood why she was hated, but it was too late. The source of all these damn problems was that original novel. Even with all this crap happening, Yuri was still thinking of her dear mother. She let out a bitter laugh and told her that she would be with her soon. In her heart, Yuri said goodbye to that chaotic ducal family and her pathetic life. In that moment, she never expected to instantly return to the past. The girl turned around in shock and saw her mother with an anxious look on her face. A minute ago, she thought her mother was dead, but now she was right in front of her. The woman stood frozen by the bed, looking at her pensive daughter. She asked the girl how she was feeling, but a tear rolled down her cheek. She touched her forehead, trying to check her temperature. Yuri grabbed her hand and asked where they were, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. The woman simply asked if she'd had a nightmare. Yuri couldn't stop crying. She tried to figure out what on earth had happened to her. She refused to believe that everything she had seen was just a nightmare. The girl remembered the moment of her death and realized that it felt too real. She asked her mother if she was dead and if this was heaven. The woman said she couldn't imagine how much she must have suffered. She gently stroked her forehead, saying there was no reason for her to die at 19. The girl looked at her mother in confusion, not understanding why she looked so old. She jumped in surprise when she heard a familiar voice. Yuri froze when she saw Lillica walk into the room. The girl stared at her with wide eyes, happy that she was awake. Yuri looked thoughtfully at her stepsister, as if she were hallucinating. Standing next to her was her brother, Jixin, the one who had wished for her to suffer. It was then that she wondered if she had returned to the past. The woman was happy to see them, and asked them to take care of Yuri. Lillica smiled brightly and told her not to worry. Jixin immediately accused Yuri of faking her illness. He asked how she dared to feign illness when she looked perfectly fine. She suddenly remembered hearing him say the exact same words when she was sick before. Now, she began to seriously doubt if she was hallucinating. She was sure the pain from the poison wouldn't have remained so clearly in her memory. Yuri suddenly remembered that she had died in the winter, right after her birthday. She clutched the bedsheets tightly, realizing she had gone back 1 year in time. Jixin asked if she was really trying to ruin Lillica's birthday celebration. She looked at him, remembering how he had urged her to die. The memory of all the things he had said flooded her mind. She realized that even though she had returned to the past, these people were still the same. Lillica begged him to be a little easier on her and told her to ignore him. She smiled, saying she was relieved that Yuri was okay. Yuri knew better than anyone what was hidden behind that angelic smile. All along, Lillica had been secretly tripping Yuri up from behind the scenes. After that ugly incident, they met in the hallway. Lillica asked if she was really going to play dumb about what happened. Yuri feigned surprise and asked her to explain what she was talking about. It was then that she finally admitted to orchestrating the whole thing. Lillica had always been a wolf in sheep's clothing, hiding her true nature. Once, she saw Yuri doing embroidery and asked for her help. She put on that fake smile and said she couldn't manage it alone. She didn't know then that Lillica was about to turn her life into a living hell. She tore up a keepsake left by her mother and blamed everything on Yuri. Her father slapped Yuri without listening to any of her explanations. He claimed his servant had seen her tear the girl's scarf. Yuri tried to explain that she had only been asked to help with the embroidery. She turned to Lillica and asked her why she was lying. Lillica said she did ask for help, but she didn't expect her to ruin it. The servants believed her story and were very shocked by Yuri's behavior. The girl didn't understand why everyone was on her side. From then on, Lillica's schemes became more and more twisted. She stole everything, turned everyone against her, and made her look like the bad guy. And now, here she was asking how she felt with a worried look on her face. Her brother immediately chimed in, saying she just wanted to ruin the party. Lillica smiled, saying that Yuri would surely come and make her birthday special. Yuri played along, saying she would never miss her party. She smiled sweetly and wished her a happy birthday in advance. The girl said she believed the party would be unforgettable. In her previous life, it certainly was. Yuri had become a laughingstock because Lillica lied about the party's dress code. She would never let them bully her as they pleased again. She swore to make everyone pay for the hellish suffering they put her through. Yuri even wanted to take down Marcel, the man she once loved. In her last life, he and Lillica had betrayed her and even helped kill her. All these years, Marcel Vieira had been playing with her for his own sick game. Now, Yuri would get her revenge on everyone and save her mother. She knew full well that she had to make the most of this second chance. The first thing she had to do was get rid of the man who treated her like trash. Yuri knew she had to act if she wanted to change her fate. That very day, she decided to summon that scumbag Marcel. He sized her up with his usual arrogant gaze. She took a deep breath and gathered the courage to fight back against the man who had pushed her to the brink. The man entered the room and asked if she was feeling better after her illness. Yuri turned to face his practiced pleasantries. She could see that there wasn't a shred of genuine concern for her in his voice or his eyes. She once thought he was just quiet and kind to her, but now she realized he was just looking for excuses to see Lillica. She had noticed it before, but always told herself she was overthinking it. Even the crest on his pocket square wasn't the Vieira family crest. He was wearing the Primrose family crest, the kind given to business partners. Couples often exchanged handkerchiefs, but this one wasn't from her. In fact, she had tried to give him a handkerchief, one she had decorated herself. Marcel had refused, saying he found the gift too precious. Now he stood here, having the nerve to tell her she wasn't the one he wanted. Yuri just gave him a cold look and said she was perfectly fine. She no longer smiled at him like a love-struck fool. She decided to stop wasting words and get straight to the point. She turned to the window and told him she knew about him and Lillica. Marcel stammered that there must be some huge misunderstanding. She told him not to bother making excuses, as she had seen everything. He retorted that she could come at him, but to leave Lillica out of it. His threats and attitude didn't make her flinch. She was someone who had faced death head-on. She smiled and said she just wanted to support them and help him. Marcel asked in confusion what she was planning to do. She traced a finger across the glass, then said she had been bedridden for a long time. Marcel said he knew, and that he was late because he was busy with work. Yuri replied that while hovering on the brink of life and death, she had been thinking about how she had lived her life. She added that she was sorry for having been a spoiled brat in the past and troubling him. She looked at him and said her father wouldn't allow the engagement to be broken. The girl then said she had an idea and asked him to hear her out. She had a sweet, innocent smile on her face, but in her mind, she was plotting his downfall. After that conversation, Yuri prepared for her sister's big party, ready to outshine her. So she made sure to follow the dress code perfectly. The moment she walked in, everyone started whispering that she was late. Lillica was all smiles, ready to greet her sister. That smile vanished when she saw Yuri perfectly matching the dress code. The girl greeted her sister smugly and apologized for being late. She was delighted to see the confused look on her sister's face. Yuri knew it was Lillica who had told the maid the dress code was burgundy. Pink was supposed to be the color for the birthday girl, while guests were supposed to wear blue. Back then, Lillica had made her look like a complete fool who would do anything out of jealousy. She walked toward her sister, promising herself that the real show was yet to come. She stared at her sister's annoyed face, while the other girl had no idea what was coming next. Lillica staggered when she heard that Yuri's fiancé had also appeared at the party. She was beyond shocked when she saw him wearing pink. She couldn't figure out how he knew her dress was pink. The nobles immediately started gossiping about a possible love triangle. Knowing what kind of rumors this would cause, she tried to correct him. To her surprise, he said he hadn't made a mistake at all. He said he couldn't stand everyone thinking it was Yuri who gave him the handkerchief. Marcel went around showing off, saying he would be receiving an embroidered handkerchief from her. He took out a piece of cloth and said he could no longer hide his feelings. Then he got down on one knee, grinning like a fool, and proposed to her. Yuri thoroughly enjoyed this over-the-top farce. And just like that, Marcel became another puppet dancing to her tune. Lillica's father was furious that his family had become a laughingstock. Yuri put on a good show, acting completely heartbroken. She hid her smile under a veil of sorrow, but the payoff was better than she had expected. A while ago, she had fed Marcel a lie that the Duke would accept him. Marcel felt it was his only chance to stay by Lillica's side. This was why he decided to step up and be a real man for the woman he loved. Now, rumors were flying about Lillica's reputation. Yuri looked away and said she didn't want to stand in the way of Lillica's happiness. The man grew even angrier, saying he wouldn't let anyone tarnish his family's name. Yuri started to cry, apologizing for what she had said. She covered her face, saying she never meant to bring shame to the family. She added that she hoped Lillica and Marcel would be happy. The girl kept crying, saying she wasn't good enough. Just then, Lillica and her brother appeared. He immediately defended her, saying nothing was going on between them. Yuri finally realized Lillica was just looking for someone to take the fall for her. Even though she had indeed given him the handkerchief, Jixin still tried to defend her. The father flew into a rage, roaring that his son was completely insane. He announced the immediate annulment of Marcel and Yuri's engagement. Jixin tried to argue, but the old man gave him no chance. He demanded an explanation, asking her why she gave a handkerchief to her sister's fiancé. Yuri held her breath, waiting to see what the girl would do next. She immediately tried to claim that he had asked her to do it. Lillica burst into tears, complaining that Yuri's embroidery was terrible. The father covered his face and asked how she could come up with something so foolish. She apologized for what she had done and started playing the victim. Jixin tried to snap her out of it, saying Marcel was the one to blame. Their mother responded to Lillica, telling her she was a member of their family. Lillica happily thanked her for her words, completely unaware of what was coming next. The woman demanded an explanation for why their outfits matched so perfectly. Yuri couldn't believe her mother had spoken her thoughts. Lillica froze in surprise, not knowing how to respond. She gave an awkward laugh and tried to pass it off as a coincidence. The woman immediately pointed out that the other guests were also wearing blue. She added that the way their outfits coordinated made it hard to believe it was just a coincidence. Yuri backed her up, saying Lillica shouldn't keep anything bottled up inside. The girl became even more confused when she finished by saying she would understand everything. Their bickering was really starting to get on their brother's nerves. He yelled that Lillica was the one who was most hurt right now, and that they weren't seeing the bigger picture at all. He decided to lash out at his mother for defending her biological daughter. Yuri couldn't believe he was treating his own mother that way. She calmly turned to her father and said she felt there was no point in arguing about this. Then, she unexpectedly suggested they invite Marcel Vieira himself over. The head of the house didn't want to see that lowlife, but Yuri had a point. After thinking for a minute, he stood up and agreed with his daughter. Jixin immediately started complaining about Yuri's precarious situation. Before he could finish, his father cut him off sharply. He said they couldn't just stand by and do nothing, and that he needed to get that through his thick skull. The old man declared he didn't want to hear another word and ordered Marcel to be brought in. After a moment, he appeared and offered his apologies. He said he was not worthy of their attention, just the son of a mere count. After a brief silence, he said he truly loved Lillica and hoped for their blessing. The girl immediately recoiled, saying her feelings were not the same. She added that she was only nice to him because he was her sister's fiancé. Marcel felt a surge of anger at the girl's hurtful lies. Yuri watched thoughtfully as Lillica discarded him so quickly. She always loved causing trouble for others, but now she had fallen into a trap herself. The girl was surprised when asked why she gave him the handkerchief. She started making excuses, saying he was the one who had asked for her help. Marcel flinched, saying he clearly remembered what she had said. That day, she had secretly confessed that she loved him, but that they couldn't be together. She promised to cherish her feelings for him forever. She trembled even more when her father asked what all this meant. Lillica started crying again, saying it was all lies and that he was just upset. Marcel's face darkened as he asked if she was afraid of Yuri. Lillica was completely stunned when he said the girl had already given them her blessing. She glared at him as if to say, "What on earth are you talking about?" The girl's mother cut in, saying they had no shame. Marcel retorted that he never intended to accuse Yuri of anything. Their father ordered him to shut up, scolding him for slandering both Lillica and Yuri. Lillica backed him up, saying he had gone too far. The man looked at their faces in confusion, saying there must be some misunderstanding. He couldn't believe his beloved was a liar. After a moment, he turned to Yuri and asked if this was all her doing. He suddenly guessed that she was the one bullying Lillica. The girl calmly asked what reason she would have to do that. Marcel immediately demanded to know why Lillica was rejecting him. He started ranting that she had promised to help, but was now causing trouble for herself. The head of the house intervened, saying he would not let him marry either Lillica or Yuri. He added that he would annul the engagement and send a formal letter to the Count. Afterward, she returned to her room, and her mother began to comfort her. She broke down, asking for forgiveness for ever considering marrying her daughter to a scumbag. The girl tried to calm her down, telling her everything was fine. She knew very well that he wasn't just a fool, but a vile and cruel man. She kept quiet about the time he had dragged her back home when she tried to run away. The woman said she would handle the annulment. The girl lowered her head guiltily, saying she had something to confess. She didn't have the heart to tell her that she was going to die soon. She asked her to take care of herself and said she would handle everything. Yuri added that she was worried about her because of her frail health. She started to say that she didn't want her to worry about her. The woman suddenly declared that she would go out more to support and protect her. She added that she would not tolerate any disrespect toward her daughter. In her past life, she had only lived until a few months before her 20th birthday. She died tragically due to harmful substances put in her cosmetics. At that time, many noble women were dying from lead poisoning. Her mother barely wore makeup, so the risk wasn't high. Even so, she still died an early death. Yuri had no idea her own family was involved. Her mother was the first high society lady to die from low-dose, lead-based cosmetics. Yuri tried to talk to her father about it, as the cause of death seemed suspicious. He didn't want to hear her argument about his wife barely wearing makeup. He slapped her hard and yelled at her to shut up. The man claimed she did use lead powder. He wiped his hands in disgust, saying, "Like mother, like daughter." From that point on, she had no one left to protect her. In this life, Yuri was certain that her mother was the only one who supported her. She swore over and over that she would protect her and never lose her. She held her hand tightly, wishing she could do anything to make them happy. After that incident, Lillica never appeared before her again. They left her alone for a while, letting her have a few peaceful days. One day, Yuri was suddenly reminded of the festival. Her mother happily agreed to her proposal to attend the festival together. Hearing her mother's agreement, Yuri was so thrilled she was almost in shock. Despite her joy, every day was still filled with anxiety. She was terrified that someone might have already poisoned her mother. To make matters worse, she didn't have a single shred of real evidence. Nevertheless, she knew she had no choice but to find the culprit behind it all. Her mother noticed that her daughter's mood was off, and the girl immediately snapped out of it, saying she was fine. When her mother started coughing, a wave of anxiety washed over her. Yuri was truly frightened, worried that someone had already made a move on her mother. She recalled the scene of checking all the dishes after her mother's death. Yuri deduced that the poison might have been added to the food during the cooking process. After a moment's pause, the girl announced she wanted to speak with the butler. A short while later, the man came to the room to confer with her. Yuri gathered her courage, preparing to make her request. The butler's family had served the Primrose family for several generations. The butler was a decent man, but he didn't give Yuri the respect she deserved. She decided to get straight to the point and demanded he take her to the kitchen. The man tried to figure out what exactly she was dissatisfied with. Yuri simply said she needed to check the kitchen, and that was all. She added that she hadn't called him over for no reason, but because she needed his help. The man bowed and apologized for his meddling. Afterward, he silently hurried to carry out her sudden request. First and foremost, Yuri needed the kind of influence and trust that the butler possessed. He wanted to gather all the staff before going in. Yuri strode forward without hesitation and threw open the kitchen doors. All the servants were completely caught off guard when they saw her. She immediately ordered everyone to stop what they were doing and not to touch the food again. Even the chefs were very surprised by her sudden demand. The girl demanded that all of them look directly at her. Yuri confidently announced she was going to check something and that everyone had to keep their eyes on her. She remembered that after her mother's death, the servants had whispered that she would soon follow in her footsteps. They hoped things would go smoothly, or they would be in big trouble. The maids gossiped nonstop about what Yuri was up to in the room. Meanwhile, the girl herself was grief-stricken over her mother's death. She held back a torrent of sobs, desperately trying to find the culprit from her past life. She had never imagined she would do what she was about to do. She had never thought the problem could be the syrup her mother added to her food. Yuri knew that if it was the problem, she would be able to find the culprit here. She made up her mind. She knew she absolutely could not let this happen again. After a long silence, the girl turned to the person in charge of the food. The servants immediately scrambled to say they were willing to do whatever she wanted. Yuri simply asked them to watch her closely. The butler had never even imagined she would be so forceful. The servants were all stunned, nervously guessing what she intended to do with those flowers. Without a word, she walked straight to the huge container of syrup. She dipped the flour into the pot, waiting to see what would happen. A chef tried to step forward and stop her, but the butler told him to stay put. The plant in her hand was called Bacchos, and it could grow all year round. They almost never used it for medicine, but it would react with lead. When black smoke filled the entire room, her intuition had been completely correct. The flour dissolved completely, and a strange smell filled the place. She announced that this syrup was used to make the desserts served to her mother. The servants all covered their mouths with their hands. When she asked who made it, everyone was terrified. After a heavy silence, a young girl raised her hand and said she had made it. Yuri looked at her and recognized her as Lillica's handmaiden. The girl confessed that she had been making the syrup ever since she started working here 6 months ago. Yuri asked the butler if he had seen everything that just happened. She shouted for them to call the guards and seize the handmaiden as soon as possible. The girl explained the reaction between the flour and the substance in the pot. The handmaiden had no idea the pot was made of that substance. She began to tremble like a leaf, trying to say it was all a huge misunderstanding. The butler pointed at her and said she was being accused of attempted murder. The girl grew even more panicked, swearing she was innocent. Just then, she remembered the first time she had met Lillica. Lillica had immediately won the handmaiden over with her kindness and promised to help her. She said she was really worried about her and asked if she liked making desserts. The girl replied that it was difficult for her to make syrup using such a heavy pot. Lillica smiled slyly and said she had noticed the same thing when she cooked herself. She handed her a pot, saying it was much more convenient than the one in the kitchen. The handmaiden was blinded by the fact that she would care about a common servant like herself. Lillica smiled and said she just wanted to make her work a little easier. Only now did the handmaiden realize what that kindness had cost her. She tried to say there was another explanation and that Lillica knew nothing about it. Everyone knew how much her mother loved that dessert and how often she ate it. Yuri felt rage churning inside her and demanded they bring Lillica before her. The butler immediately ordered a servant to fetch the girl. Lillica once again put on her innocent act, saying she had indeed given her the pot. The butler pressed her on where she had gotten the pot. She said she bought it from a peddler and didn't know it was made of lead. The butler tried to ask for the peddler's name and the street where she bought it. She was immediately blamed for buying the pot from an unknown source and giving it to the handmaiden. Lillica tried to defend herself, saying she ate the dessert herself as well. Seeing that slippery snake try to squirm her way out of it made Yuri even more furious. She clearly remembered that Lillica had always refused to eat that dessert. Even back then, Yuri had looked at the girl and known she was hiding something. She had noticed Lillica wasn't feeling well and offered to call a doctor for her. She used to love sweets the most, but then she suddenly stopped eating them. Now Yuri realized that she herself could have died from eating those desserts. She turned to Lillica and asked if she understood how important it was to inspect the dishes. The girl flinched when her sister added that someone would pay the price for this. The handmaiden recalled how Lillica had insisted on using that specific pot. She suddenly changed her tune, asking if she looked crazy. The girl lied, saying she had told her long ago that the pot was for decoration. To save her own skin, she was ready to throw anyone under the bus. In her past life, that handmaiden would have done anything for Lillica, no matter what she asked. But now, the moment Lillica felt threatened, she became a disposable pawn. It was then that Yuri realized she needed to make her revenge plan more seamless. In the end, they pushed all the blame onto the handmaiden and covered the whole thing up. The punishment was severe, despite the handmaiden's attempts to defend herself. She screamed Miss Lillica's name, but the real culprit didn't care at all. In the end, her fate was sealed, as the lady of the house could have died because of it. When the lady understood it all, she nearly fainted. Everyone blamed the handmaiden, too afraid to point the finger at Lillica herself. Meanwhile, the real troublemaker was panicking, trying to figure out how Yuri had discovered everything. She immediately began to suspect there was a mole among her own people. From that point on, Lillica could no longer trust any of her people. The next day, Yuri's mother thanked her for saving her life. She had lost weight from being so scared the past few days. Yuri told her to take extra good care of herself. She smiled and said she had a small gift for her. The girl handed her mother a bottle of moisturizing cream made from calendula flowers. The lady was stunned by such a wonderful and special gift. Yuri smiled and said that with this, she would no longer need to use powder. Calendula flowers only bloomed at specific times, but Yuri had used her ability. It seemed her mother had completely forgotten she had that kind of skill. The novel said that members of the Primrose family possessed a special power called a blessing. Jackson possessed a unique power of swordsmanship that helped him win in battle. Lillica had unlocked a healing power, but it had not yet fully manifested. Yuri herself had obtained an unusual power of growth. At first, she was frustrated because this ability didn't work on people or animals. Once she realized its limitations, she gave up on her power. The girl refused to believe that was all her ability could do. After some time, she began to discover new details about her power. It turned out she could make plants grow at super speed, regardless of the conditions. And what was more amazing was that the plants she grew had extraordinary effects. Once she figured this out, she decided she had to use it to make money. In the end, her obsession with cosmetics became a real turning point. At first, when she suggested her mother try the cream, her mother was a bit hesitant. But when she felt how smooth the cream was, she was immediately amazed. Yuri smiled and offered to apply the cream for her. Just one application made her hands as soft as a baby's. Yuri's mother gave her a big hug, saying she hadn't even noticed how hard her daughter had been working. She sincerely thanked her daughter for everything she had done. After some time, Prince Enoch Piast coldly thanked them for their service. The ladies all marveled at how smooth and soft her skin was. The lady humbly replied that she was just using a special cream. One lady clasped her hands together, begging her to reveal her secret. She replied mysteriously that she would tell them everything soon. Yuri watched from a distance, admiring how stunning her mother looked. The moment she appeared, everyone was talking about her. They took a walk together, talking about how popular she had become. Yuri's mother said she had turned down all her invitations just to be with her daughter. She suddenly stopped and suggested they check out a tailor shop. Yuri completely agreed and immediately followed her in. Her mother smiled and said she wanted to have the most beautiful dress made for her. As soon as they walked in, a female clerk greeted them. The Duchess said she wanted to pick out a dress for her daughter. While they were browsing the designs, the clerk served Yuri some tea. The girl happily accepted and sat down at the coffee table. She was sincerely enjoying these peaceful moments with her mother. Yuri was lost in thought until she heard that voice. Marcel Vieira was grinning, acting ecstatic about this pleasant coincidence. Yuri concluded the obnoxious fellow was stalking her and smelled alcohol on him. He flew into a rage, saying his whole life was ruined because of them. The guy grabbed her wrist, claiming Lillica was avoiding him because of her interference. The handmaidens were all stunned and didn't know what to do. Yuri told him to let go, saying this had little to do with her. Marcel laughed out loud, as if her words were a slap in the face. He kept saying it was all her fault that Lillica was avoiding him. She told him that maybe Lillica wasn't interested in him because he was completely charmless. It seemed her words had once again struck a blow to the guy's ego. The veins on his neck bulged, and his eyes turned unusually wild. Yuri immediately felt him tighten his grip on her wrist. She looked at her hand, realizing that at this rate, he would break her wrist. She gritted her teeth, unable to understand how she could have ever fallen for a man like this. Yuri needed help, but the knights were just idling outside. She turned to the handmaidens and demanded they go get help as soon as possible. They immediately agreed, but did absolutely nothing. Marcel held her hand in a death grip until another person pulled him off her. He said he didn't want to get involved in a personal grudge, but he couldn't just stand by and watch. When Marcel realized he was facing the prince himself, he turned pale with fear. The prince began to harshly reprimand the fellow for his behavior. In a tone of utter contempt, he accused him of casting aside his honor as a nobleman and a knight. Yuri was stunned, not expecting the crown prince to help her again. Something similar had happened in her past life. Back on the night of that festival, she was once again left out, as if she didn't belong. Meanwhile, Marcel was having fun with Lillica, trampling his fiancé's reputation underfoot. The nobles cheered them on and said more bad things about Yuri. They all agreed that things would be much better if it were Lillica instead. It was extremely rude and disrespectful, but she was speechless. At one point, she even started to believe they were right. She knew any apology they offered would be completely insincere. All she could do was leave quietly, without ruining everyone else's night. She was about to slip away, but a man's voice stopped her. It was the prince. He called out Lord Vieira for asking his fiancé's sister to dance. He turned to Yuri and asked if she thought that was acceptable. They never crossed paths again after that, but she remembered his words as if it were yesterday. Back then, she definitely hadn't expected to see him again. He condemned Marcel's violent behavior, calling him a disgrace to all men. The bastard immediately tried to justify himself, saying she was playing games with him. The prince asked if he really thought Yuri was threatening him, and if that's why he was harassing her sister. He also brought up the fact that Marcel had proposed to Lillica. Yuri had never expected him to stand up for her like this. The prince's tone as he spoke to him was perfectly calm, yet firm. He was acting exactly the same as he had the night he helped her. Just as she was thinking this, her mother appeared in the room. She immediately started fussing over the girl, asking how her wrist was. Marcel tried to slip away as quickly as possible, saying he had a meeting with a count. Yuri was disappointed that he was such a coward he wouldn't even apologize. The prince said that such scum wasn't even worth a second glance. After a brief pause, he suddenly asked if he could see her wrist. He examined her hand carefully and determined there were no broken bones. Even so, he noted her skin was badly injured and there was definitely bruising. The girl smiled calmly and said it would heal. The prince was shocked at how calm and composed she was. The duchess thanked him for standing up for her daughter. He admitted he had just stopped by the tailor shop at Vivian's request and hadn't expected any of this to happen. They hadn't seen the princess in a while, but they knew she wasn't in good health. The duchess said she sincerely hoped the princess would get well soon. The prince was just dreaming of her recovery so they could play together again. Yuri seemed to have completely forgotten that the princess's condition wasn't exactly good. The prince wouldn't say she was gravely ill, but there was definitely something wrong. He said he would only tell them if they swore to keep it secret. It turned out the princess's skin had started to deteriorate badly after she turned 10. This made her so anxious that she simply stopped leaving the palace. She refused to see anyone except the prince and a few of her handmaidens. Even so, she still wanted to know what was happening in the outside world. She felt like a caged bird, trapped at home because of her condition. The prince admitted this was the very reason he had come to the tailor shop in the first place. She was curious about what dress styles were in fashion, and he wanted to keep her updated. The prince was trying to pique her interest, hoping she would be willing to go out. In addition, he had found out that the duchess's skin had improved because of a certain cream. He was surprised she wasn't using one of those cosmetics with questionable ingredients. He earnestly requested any advice they could offer on the situation. Seeing their surprised expressions, the prince promised to reward them handsomely. He wasn't putting on airs or trying to leverage the recent favor he had done for them. Yuri decided to come clean. Her skin had improved thanks to cosmetics she had made herself. The prince got excited, thinking the princess should try something similar. To everyone's surprise, the girl immediately refused his request. She explained that everyone's skin is different. Yuri couldn't risk making things worse with that kind of cosmetic. The prince's face fell when she said there could be side effects. After those words, an awkward silence fell over the room. Despite the rejection, Yuri tried to think of a way, any way at all. To help, she suggested meeting the princess in person. Yuri agreed with the prince's guess and admitted she had made the cosmetics herself. The prince marveled that their country had someone with such talent. Meanwhile, the princess was spending another evening alone. The handmaiden was at a loss when she was told to deliver food to the princess's chambers. She sighed wearily and knocked on the princess's door. Getting no response, the handmaiden announced that she had brought lunch. Just then, she started to worry she might catch whatever illness the girl had. The girl turned and saw a handmaiden who had been working there longer. She explained that she was supposed to just leave the food at the door and knock. Dahlia decided to show her the proper way to do it. The princess only responded when she heard Dahlia was alone. Just a few days ago, Yuri had received an invitation from the prince. The guard said that His Highness was waiting for Miss Yuri of the Primrose family. Yuri watched the royal carriage from her room's window. She was surprised the prince hadn't delayed on this matter. It seemed he really saw hope in my skills. Since we last met, he was very shocked that day that I had actually made it myself. She understood it was hard to believe such cosmetics even existed. Everyone in the market was buzzing about the miraculous formulas. That was all they had been talking about. She had been working hard to unlock her gift and make cosmetics for her mother. She didn't care at all whether anyone believed her. After a brief pause, the prince asked her for a favor. He smiled and asked her to go see his sister and figure out the situation. Yuri couldn't help but wonder how different her life would have been if she'd had a brother like that. After thinking for a moment, she decided to go and greet the guard. He said that as soon as she was ready, they would head straight for the palace. Lillica came running over, asking with a surprised look what was happening. Yuri didn't want to go into detail, only saying she had to go. Lillica was much sterner than usual, demanding she explain what she had done this time. Yuri realized her sister wasn't listening to her at all. Lillica quickly interjected that she was just worried about her. She offered to go with her, since it involved the Primrose family. Yuri was disgusted that she was showing her true colors again so quickly. Lillica had always dreamed of catching the prince's attention. She would do anything to attend a ball where the prince was present. Yuri saw through all the motives hidden under her for your own good facade. She put on an innocent expression, suggesting Lillica shouldn't draw attention to herself. Even the guards were shocked by the girl's audacity. Yuri asked if she really wanted to go in place of the person the crown prince had personally requested. Lillica said she could be ready in a moment, but the guard refused her. When she heard it was Yuri the prince wanted to see, her face twisted in anger. Lillica tried to provoke him, but he didn't react to her emotional fluctuations at all. Seeing the look in his eyes, she apologized, saying she was just worried about her sister. The girl decided to back down and wished her sister a good time. Yuri left, secretly thrilled by Lillica's fear. She stopped in front of the carriage and thanked Lillica for sharing everything with her. The girl smiled smugly and said she was right. People always love to gossip. She casually hinted that everyone was whispering about her stealing her sister's fiancé. Lillica froze in shock, wanting to say something, but was cut off. Yuri remembered her mother's words and suggested she think carefully about her relationship with Marcel. The girl looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole when she suggested finding an excuse. Yuri returned the smile and said she was just looking out for her. After that, she left, leaving Lillica alone with her fears. It was then that she finally understood that all her bad premonitions were completely justified. It just confirmed what she already knew. Yuri was the mastermind behind it all. The girl replayed the entire ball scene in her mind, and yes, her sister was definitely the planner. She was completely broken and humiliated, but she decided, what it was all meant to be. Meanwhile, Yuri finally arrived at the palace. She got out of the carriage, already calculating how she would take everything from Lillica. After arriving at the palace, it was still a long walk to the princess's residence. Even though she was the one who had proposed the meeting, she was still terribly nervous. The princess's personal handmaiden greeted her, saying they had been waiting for her. She gave a sweet smile and asked her to follow. Yuri took a good look around and then nodded. After what felt like an eternity of waiting, they finally reached the princess's chambers. They entered the room and saw a table set with refreshments. Yuri curtsied and quickly introduced herself to the princess. To her surprise, the princess told her to dispense with the formalities. Then she invited her to sit down for some tea. Yuri did as she was told and tried to start a simple conversation. Unfortunately, the princess wasn't receptive to her attempts to get closer. They sat like that for a whole hour, and Yuri felt like she was going crazy. She was trying to get her to relax before bringing up the topic of her skin. Meanwhile, the princess thought she was a pathetic creature and didn't understand why her brother had brought her. She had heard rumors about Yuri Primrose before. People said she had a fiery temper and was a real troublemaker who only caused problems. She had agreed to see her because she still held a grudge against Lillica. She remembered that time when everyone was talking about the princess's worsening skin. They compared her to Lillica's flawless complexion, and Lillica was basking in the compliments. She even said that if she were the princess, she wouldn't show her face in public at all. Since then, she had hated all the girls who made fun of her. She hated her life for being stuck in such a miserable situation. Yuri was the only one who had taken the princess's side and called out Lillica. The princess remembered something and wanted to know how she had first met the prince. Yuri smiled and told her how the prince had come to her rescue. She mentioned her ex-fiancé showing up at the dress shop and starting to give her a hard time. She had only gotten out of the situation thanks to the prince himself. Yuri decided to show her the bruise left on her arm. She said they had almost broken her arm, succeeding in startling the princess. The princess exclaimed that Marcel Vieira was a real piece of work. She took her hand and asked how she could have ever wanted to marry someone like that. Yuri was shocked that the princess was actually feeling sorry for her. The girl suddenly snapped back to reality and apologized for everything she had said. The conversation made Yuri realize she was just a normal girl. She decided to approach it from the side and broach the topic of her skin type. Yuri politely asked if she could see her face. The princess immediately grew tense, as if she couldn't do it. Yuri tried to reassure her, saying it wouldn't take long. The girl didn't understand why she needed to see this horrible face. She asked if she could really help, even after seeing her face. Yuri completely understood why she had trouble trusting people. The sharp words sounded like a strong defense mechanism at work, but Yuri could see that she was ready to grasp even the faintest glimmer of hope. She admitted she wasn't a real doctor or priest, and Yuri blurted out that her mother might have just been lucky. She held the princess's hand tightly and said she was here to help. She promised to do everything she could to make things better. The princess was shocked that she had come all this way without any guarantees, but after dealing with so many glib charlatans, Yuri had won her trust. She pulled her hand back and looked at the girl seriously. The princess prepared to remove her robe, saying she trusted her. As it turned out, her condition was much worse than Yuri had expected. The princess said the prince had invited priests to help her. Unfortunately, it was only a temporary relief and didn't cure her. She admitted that was why she didn't have much hope for Yuri's abilities. After receiving so much treatment with holy power, the princess felt unworthy of appearing in public. Yuri had only come to repay the prince's help, but even so, she now wanted to help the unfortunate girl. After a while, she announced the examination was over and thanked the princess for her patience. The princess didn't understand what patience she was referring to. She knew that looking directly at her face was far more difficult than conducting the examination. Yuri thought of using lavender and aloe, which are hard to find. She had to soothe the girl's skin and find a place to grow the plants. The princess offered her garden in the palace and told her to let her know if she needed anything. She had heard that Yuri made cosmetics from plants. The princess, thinking Yuri might be shy, added that it was an order. Yuri agreed, thinking her cosmetics were better than those dubious powders anyway. She asked the princess to stop using them from now on. The princess said she understood and asked Yuri why she hid her hobby. Yuri explained it was because her reputation wasn't very good. She added that associating with her could damage the princess's reputation. The princess felt terrible, as she too had judged her based on rumors. She told her to be more confident and not to mind what others thought. Yuri was shocked by her decision to support her. Just then, the prince caught up to them, a wide smile on his face. They greeted each other, and then he asked how their chat was going. He also apologized for having to leave them so soon. Furthermore, he noted that Vivian and the girl were actually getting along quite well. The princess immediately blushed and began to deny his embarrassing remarks. She was angry with the prince, but Yuri could see they had a good relationship. After a brief back and forth, he asked Yuri if she was leaving. He smiled and offered to see her to her waiting carriage. A moment later, Yuri's carriage was ready to depart. The prince returned to his sister, wondering what she thought of Miss Primrose. The girl replied thoughtfully that she wasn't like other noble ladies. cosmetics. The man was clearly surprised by her statement and asked why she thought so. The princess simply pointed out that the girl hadn't pitted her. Afterwards, she decided to see if he agreed with her assessment. He suddenly remembered they had met once when they were children. They had bumped into each other that day, which seemed to bother her. He had remembered her smile ever since, but never managed to say anything. Hearing he had nothing to say, the princess turned and smiled. She jokingly called him a bore and said she was leaving. Vivian explained that she needed to prepare something she had promised Yuri. She turned to Dahlia, asking her to contact the largest merchant guild around. After that, the girl hastily disappeared behind the room's door. As soon as he was alone, a mischievous smile appeared on his face. He blushed, hoping he hadn't given everything away. Only a few days had passed since then, all spent on research. Yuri proudly announced that she had finally finished the princess's potion. She glanced at the ornate clock and realized she had actually finished on time. She often had to rely on blessings, as not all plants could take root in the princess's garden. One day, she overworked herself so much that she even got a nosebleed. She couldn't mass-produce the cosmetics. Her abilities were limited to this. Just as she was thinking about Messenger, someone started knocking on her door. She turned warily toward the rattling front door, a sense of foreboding washing over her. She might have expected anyone, but not her detestable brother. She hated his attitude the moment he stepped into the room. He shot her a look that could freeze hell and asked if she knew what she was doing. Jixon asked if she was really dreaming of becoming the crown princess. He pressed her on whether it was true she had been invited to the imperial palace. The guy shut his mouth when he heard the butler's voice behind him. When Dixon heard that Her Highness the Princess was waiting for him, he turned pale with fright. Yuri told him to get out of the way and not keep the princess waiting. She smirked triumphantly and walked past him, saying she was busy right now. The girl hurried to meet the princess, cursing Jixon under her breath. Meanwhile, Vivian was arguing with Lillica, who was desperately trying to cling to her. She didn't like that she was ignoring her requests and pestering her with endless chatter. She decided to make her stance clear, saying she didn't care about Lillica at all. Lillica turned pale with anger when she heard her sister's voice. She couldn't believe her sister would show up at a time like this. Yuri apologized for her sister and said it was her fault. After being called unreasonable, Lillica bit her lip in anger. The princess looked at Yuri and said that for her sake, she would let it go this time. After that, they left, leaving Lillica all alone. The girl was completely stunned that her troublemaking sister had caught the princess's attention. Yuri took Vivian to another room to show her the new product. She showed her a cream with a hint of fragrance added. Yuri said she could adjust the formula if she didn't like the scent. The princess admitted she hadn't come for the cosmetics. She said she was still wearing her veil, but wanted to thank her in person. Then she dramatically removed her veil, revealing her radiant face. Furthermore, she said, somewhat embarrassed, that she wanted to call her by her first name. She admitted with a blush that she wanted to associate with her for more than just makeup tips and skincare routines. Yuri became flustered and agreed, saying she also enjoyed their conversations. The princess was thrilled. They became friends and got along very well. Yuri was genuinely happy, as she had never had any friends either. They smiled at each other, saying they were already looking forward to their next meeting. During their conversation, Yuri mentioned she was passionate about making cosmetics. She was convinced her products could genuinely help a lot of people. While developing the ointment for the princess, she discovered her products could even heal wounds. In the Empire, even minor wounds could only be treated by the clergy. The princess agreed that her creations could be a real game changer for many people. Furthermore, she suggested that we consult with her brother. She asked for some time to arrange a meeting for all of us. A few days later, Yuri really started to consider partnering with the prince. She realized that a business partner like him could be a huge advantage. Moreover, she could sell her cosmetics under a different name. A few seconds later, she finally reached the door of the room. The girl snapped out of her thoughts and prepared to open the door. To her surprise, she saw her family. Her father immediately started questioning her about the princess's personal things. The butler said that the princess held Miss Yuri in high regard. Yuri was disgusted with herself for being interested in this only for personal gain. She looked away and admitted she couldn't reveal anything. The guy immediately guessed that if she wanted to keep it a secret, it must be a big deal. Yuri decided to use this to her advantage, saying they almost didn't get to meet. She started hinting that the princess was furious about what had happened. The butler interjected that he could tell the story himself. His smile turned serious as the man asked what had happened. The loyal butler spilled the beans on everything Lillica and Jixin had messed up. Yuri was delighted that her father completely lost his mind. He roared, slamming a fist on the table, and then demanded that Lillica and Jixin be brought before him. As soon as they appeared, he began to scold them for disrespecting the princess. Jixin started making excuses, saying Yuri had probably been rude to her highness. His father berated him harshly for this move and ordered him to apologize to Yuri. They had no choice but to bow their heads and beg for forgiveness. Yuri secretly gloated over the satisfying scene. She imagined how humiliated they must feel and decided it was time to get down to business. She left the room to prepare for something important. That same day, she met with the prince, who was interested in a business deal. After a few minutes of conversation, he asked what she thought of his proposal. Yuri said thoughtfully that she had something to say before answering. She said that if he was just trying to repay her for healing his sister, she didn't need his help. The prince said that wasn't it all. He was simply interested in her proposal. He added that even just selling cosmetics was a solid idea. Furthermore, he was very interested in the fact that the cream was a custom formula. He smiled and asked her to explain that part in more detail. After a short pause, Yuri smiled and praised him for his good question. During their conversation, the prince suggested that the company's management and product development be assigned to different people. Furthermore, they decided to list the ingredients and distribute free samples at the beginning. She thought this would allow customers to decide whether to buy or not. The prince praised her idea, realizing they could attract a whole new audience. He agreed and decided to move on with her business idea. The girl interrupted him, pointing out that he was interested in the business himself. The prince agreed thoughtfully and asked if there was a problem. Yuri asked him to explain the benefits of doing business with him instead of someone else. She had already explained her development strategy to him, but she was interested in other details. Yuri knew other investors might come along, and she needed to see the benefit of sticking with him. It seemed the prince had definitely not expected to hear such a question from her. Yuri was well aware that support from the royal family was important to her. On top of that, Lillica could soon become a saintess, which would affect the balance of power. She tried to act confident, but she ended up just making him laugh. The prince completely flustered her and then said it was a good question. He suggested they start by explaining the imperial trade guilds. After a long back and forth, they finally reached a decent agreement. All business investments would be made solely in the crown prince's name. Furthermore, Yuri mentioned she wanted to keep her identity a secret. She was convinced that her public involvement wouldn't help matters. Yuri was worried the risks might be too great to bear. She wanted to minimize the chances of things going wrong. The prince understood it was related to the rumors and didn't know how to help her. He clenched his fist and promised to keep it a secret for the time being. The prince smiled smugly and said that earning his and Vivian's trust was no easy feat. She blushed, thanking him for his trust, which made him laugh again. Yuri was flustered by the crown prince's praise. He suddenly touched her hair and said he had to go home. Yuri blushed, trying to figure out when he had gotten so close. The crown prince replied playfully that there was just something in her hair. It seemed he enjoyed how shy Yuri became when she talked to him. She looked away in embarrassment, saying she could get it herself. Yuri couldn't help but wonder if he was always this considerate and mischievous. She told him not to do that to other noble ladies, or people might get the wrong idea. He smiled and agreed, saying he should be more careful. The girl couldn't believe the future emperor could be so cheerful. Yuri respected this passion for life that she herself lacked. Crown Prince Enoch had a rather tragic past. Once, he was in a carriage with his mother, but the carriage fell off a cliff. Enoch was almost the only one to survive the fall from such a height. Bleeding, he watched his mother die on the spot. His parents had fought often since he was a child. After every fight, his mother would return her family home, but one time, he begged to go with her. So his older brother, Enoch, and Vivian all squeezed into the carriage with their mother. Unfortunately, on the way through the woods, their entire party was killed in a crash. That night, everyone died except for him and Princess Vivian. When he returned home, his father immediately started blaming him. He wailed, not understanding why his father kept saying it was his fault. The man looked at him as if he were trash, endlessly repeating that it was all his responsibility. Before long, the terrible truth came to light, shaking the entire family. It turned out his father wanted to make his mistress the new empress. He had gotten rid of his own wife, but he hadn't expected his own father to find out. The old man harshly rebuked him, saying he was no longer his son and that the throne would pass to his surviving grandson. Furthermore, he exiled him to the borders of the empire for the rest of his life. After a long argument, they threw him out of the palace, and the emperor approached his grandson. He said Enoch had always been a bright child and expressed his belief that he could handle things. The boy didn't take it as a compliment, as all expectations now rested on him. Most of all, he hoped Enoch wouldn't turn out like his father. Years later, his father did return to the capital, but in a coffin. Everyone whispered that he had fallen ill suddenly despite his good health. When someone said the emperor had decided to take care of his son, Enoch froze in shock. For years, he had hated his father, believing he had killed his wife and children. One day, it dawned on him that these rumors about the emperor might not be all nonsense. These thoughts weighed on his heart like a heavy anvil. Enoch shivered, feeling a wave of nausea in his throat. He rushed out, needing to get some fresh air, even though the funeral had just begun. They tried to stop him, but he kept running without looking back. He was afraid that one day he would fail to be the perfect grandson, and they would want to get rid of him. Enoch didn't know how much longer he could live under his grandfather's expectations. He was afraid that if he annoyed someone, they might get rid of him too. The boy ran up the stairs until he found a girl he didn't recognize. She froze in place as soon as she saw the cold-looking prince. The next moment, she gasped in shock when she realized who it was. The boy immediately recognized Yuri Primrose by her silver hair. The girl gasped and told him he had scared her. At first, she really thought some beast had jumped out of the shadows. She tried to explain, but he just said his father was a monster too. He asked if their blood relation meant he was a monster too. The girl deduced logically that Vivian must be a monster as well. Then, the boy was surprised, clearly not expecting her to be so blunt. She asked if he really thought his sister was the same kind of monster. As soon as he said no, she told him that meant he wasn't one either. She bluntly asked him why he thought differently of himself. Enoch used to think he was the same as his father, but he had never thought of Vivian that way. He had never thought that of the girl he was trying to protect. Enoch flatly refused to see that little thing as a monster. Yuri asked him why he would say things to himself that he would never say to his sister. When he heard those simple words, he felt a pang in his chest. People had only ever pitted him for his loss and all the terrible rumors. People had always said he would be a great emperor because he was smart. Even so, not a single one of them had ever wondered how he felt. Yuri was the first person to try and see him beyond all the usual things. She had said exactly what he had always wanted to hear. He smiled genuinely and said he would remember her words. After that conversation, he went straight back to his grandfather. He apologized clearly and forcefully for his departure and promised it wouldn't happen again. Enoch declared that he would become a great emperor, even better than him. The old man was surprised at first, then laughed at what he said. He praised his strong will, saying it was exactly how his grandson should be. Enoch just looked back at him with eyes far more mature than his age. That day, he swore he would no longer let himself be afraid of him. He didn't want to become like his grandfather or his terrible father. As he trained, he kept thinking of Yuri, and her words gave him strength. His feelings have been a mess ever since. The image of that little girl was deeply engraved in his heart from the day they met. He wanted to go up to her every time and tell her she was his first love. The next day, Yuri went to visit her beloved mother again. She insisted her mom rest, as she had suddenly caught a cold. Her mom smiled, told her not to worry, and promised she would be fine. After she started the business with the prince, her mother was genuinely proud of her. She told Yuri to spread her wings and said she hoped she would achieve even more. She added that she wouldn't tell anyone, after which Yuri smiled and thanked her. Their peaceful moment was suddenly interrupted by an unwelcome visitor. Yuri felt a wave of disgust as Lillica asked about her mother's condition. She said she had come to visit her and brought a bouquet of flowers as a gift. Yuri carefully examined the flowers in the bouquet, taking everything in. Lillica clearly hadn't expected her sister to recognize the threat. Yuri roughly snatched the bouquet and asked if she knew what those flowers were. In their empire, white lilies were used to mourn the dead. In the past, when their mother was unwell, Lillica had brought the same flowers. Yuri lost her temper and started railing against Lillica, which was noticed by Jixon. He didn't believe her, saying she couldn't have gotten those flowers on her own. Lillica backed him up and told him Yuri had hit her. Yuri tried to deny everything, but Lillica threw the bouquet into the fireplace, destroying the evidence. After that, she started openly accusing Yuri of losing her cool. The girl wasn't going to fall for the same trick again and asked if she knew the meaning of those flowers. She got the reaction she wanted and asked who had given them to her. All the maids were stunned when she asked if one of her own maids had done it. The girls immediately denied it, saying Lillica had bought the bouquet herself. Lillica trembled with rage, clearly not expecting her own servants to betray her. She apologized and promised to get rid of the flowers right away. Yuri said they couldn't just let it go, as it could damage the family's reputation. She added that they should tell her father or her brother about it. Jixin, hearing all the shouting, ran over at that moment. Yuri threw the bouquet of lilies at him, telling him to see what she had bought for their mother. Lillica started swearing she didn't know their meaning and that she just wanted to please her mom. Jixin pulled her close, saying he believed she didn't do it on purpose. Yuri insisted that Lillica's governess should be held responsible for the matter. She was sure Lillica's ignorance was due to the governess's poor teaching. Jixin agreed, realizing she actually had a point. Lillica tried to object, but Jixin insisted it was the right decision. Yuri said people might start talking about her true background. She smiled and told her to trust her sister and not to worry. Lillica bit her lip as Yuri said she would take care of it. After that, she decided to have a word with the governess. The woman insisted she had thoroughly taught Lillica all the rules of etiquette. Yuri explained that the Duke was furious and had demanded her replacement. The governess was surprised when Yuri handed her an envelope as compensation. The girl smiled and said it was a letter of recommendation. She agreed that firing her was unfair and decided to offer her support. The governess admitted that she herself had once believed the vicious rumors about Yuri. Yuri supported her, saying that rumors were indeed a terrifying force. The governess smiled mysteriously and said that rumors did indeed have power. After that, they bid each other farewell and exchanged good wishes. Yuri was curious what Mrs. Tiller would think of this whole mess. Everyone said Lillica was as beautiful as a rose, the apple of Duke Primrose's eye. Lillica Primrose was the one who had successfully broken into high society, but no one knew how scared she was of losing it all. She was furious with Yuri for messing everything up. She stared at her reflection, trying to figure out where she had gone wrong. Lillica knew that at this rate, everything would turn to dust. From the very beginning, she couldn't escape the stigma of being an illegitimate child. Yuri would sometimes laugh because no one ever invited Lillica anywhere. Her father would yell back at her, saying she needed to comfort her sister. It was then that Lillica came up with her perfect plan to make everyone fall in love with her. She constantly provoked Yuri, trying to make her look like the aggressor. Yuri would yell at her, smash cups, and humiliate her in public. After being provoked, she quickly realized it was very easy to anger Yuri. After a while, people started to notice her and even offer to help. Everyone thought Lillica was unfairly enduring all this abuse. Eventually, she even succeeded in winning the support of her father and brother. They found her an excellent governess who was popular in high society. Over time, she became known as the charming but unfortunate daughter of Duke Primrose. In this whole setup, Yuri Primrose became the villain who made her life miserable. Unfortunately, her happiness only lasted until everything spiraled completely out of control. It happened on the day Lillica celebrated her 19th birthday. Somehow, Yuri saw through all her traps. All those tricks that took advantage of Yuri's fiery temper should have worked, but somehow she managed to see through it all. Soon, everyone, including her father and the servants, began to see Lillica as a problem. What really set her off was that Yuri was invited to the imperial palace. For that alone, she was prepared to make Yuri disappear. Lillica was so angry, she wanted to smash the mirror with her own reflection. She decided to stay calm, knowing Yuri would make her next move soon. Lillica imagined in her mind how everyone would fall for her all over again. She smirked, plotting how she would take back everything Yuri had. Her determination lasted until she became the hot topic at a social gathering. Everyone was talking about the scandal Mrs. Tiller had exposed. They were all furious that she had been such a terrible guardian. Another lady interjected that they should blame Lillica, not Mrs. Tiller. They started chattering again, complaining that she was an ungrateful nobody. Lillica lost her temper, roaring at them to watch their mouths. When they saw how furious Lillica was, they immediately backed away. She dropped her innocent facade and demanded they say it to her face. Lillica reminded the girl that her family was heavily in debt to Duke Primrose. She told them to shut up, saying their families were nothing but dust. The girl rambled on, clearly not expecting Yuri to join the fray. She asked them to forgive Lillica, saying she was going through some difficulties. Yuri looked like an angel, pleading with them not to insult her sister. The ladies immediately listened to Yuri and agreed to her request. Lillica froze, like a villain caught in the act in a bad movie. She couldn't believe this was happening to her and quickly turned to leave. The girl was furious that Yuri had tried to embarrass her in front of the other ladies. Meanwhile, the ladies started gossiping about everything they had just witnessed. After all that, they decided the nasty rumors about Yuri were just a huge misunderstanding. Lillica stormed out of the building, practically diving into her carriage. Yuri snickered, saying she must not be feeling well today to be leaving so early. Lillica started to retort, saying she was the one who wasn't normal. She glared at Yuri, saying viciously that she didn't understand why she had changed so much. Yuri enjoyed that her sister was finally showing her true colors. She was about to provoke her further, but a guard told her to step aside. Then with a slam, the carriage door closed and Lillica was gone. She gave her sister a fake smile, telling her to enjoy the party. The guard immediately became very concerned, asking if she was all right. Yuri froze, watching the carriage drive away from the palace. She had thought Lillica had lost everyone, but that guard was very hostile. Yuri still didn't know how Lillica would act after becoming Saintess. Now she had to separate Lillica in that night as soon as possible. The next day, Yuri returned to her usual daily routine. She kept thinking about that night, who probably still didn't know the full truth of what she had done. When the news reached the knights, they still refused to believe Lillica was guilty. They drew their swords, unanimously deciding to protect her against Yuri. So in the eyes of the knights, Yuri was still the villain. Lillica's advantage was that she still had many people supporting her. She felt she should leave her alone for now and walked out of her office. Yuri heard her sister's wails in the distance and stopped in her tracks. A maid was trying to get Lillica to eat something, but she refused every time. She turned to the maid, Jira, and said her boyfriend had dumped her because she messed up. Jira used to adore Lillica and would do anything to please her. Yuri saw the girl's condition and decided to comfort her. She said Lillica was just in a bad mood and then began to soothe the maid. Yuri hadn't expected things to turn out this way, but she saw an opportunity in it. Jira had many friends and could be a useful ally. In the end, Yuri asked her for a small favor, and she immediately agreed. A little while later, the girl was ready to meet the prince. She had to pick some very modest clothes to avoid drawing attention. Yuri fastened her cloak, reminding herself that she couldn't be recognized. They needed to decide where to open their boutique. She explained to her mom that the crown prince would also be dressed plainly. Afterward, she said a friendly goodbye and headed to the meeting place. It felt like an eternity before her carriage finally stopped in the central square. She was worried she would attract attention, but no one gave her a second glance. Yuri froze, trying to spot the prince in the crowd. Just then, a smiling man suddenly appeared, apologizing for being late. The crown prince was a true gentleman. Let her go first. They set off, excited that no one recognized them. Yuri felt a bit awkward when she realized things were more complicated than she thought. Even though no one knew who they were, they still drew attention wherever they went. She glanced at the prince, wondering what the point of hiding their identities was if he was so conspicuous. Yuri started to sweat a little, thinking they might end up in some trashy gossip tabloid. She snapped out of it when he asked why she had such a serious expression. He jokingly asked if she was flustered because he was too handsome. Seeing her sharp gaze, he quickly clarified that he was just kidding. He thought she would relax once they started checking out potential storefronts for the boutique. After a while, Yuri realized that even though he seemed a bit odd, she felt comfortable around him. In the end, none of the buildings they looked at were suitable. The first place had a tree blocking the sign, and the second had a terrible layout. The prince told her not to give up, as they still had other options. They started brainstorming names for the boutique. Yuri, somewhat awkwardly, suggested they use the name Anita. It meant mourning and had a special meaning for her. She wanted to focus on how her cosmetics could heal the skin and soul. The prince smiled gently, once again certain he had made the right decision. He agreed with her and decided to move on to product ideas. Now that his sister's problem was solved, Enoch's mind was a blank slate. Yuri smiled and asked if he felt hot wearing the hood. He started rambling about the heat and how it affected the knights. This made her think about how badly those guys must get sunburned. Yuri smiled slyly, saying she already had a few ideas. She suggested he launch a cream that could protect the skin from the sun. After a long search, they finally found a building they liked. Luckily for them, it was located right in the center of a bustling area. Best of all, it had 2 floors, perfectly meeting all their needs. They also liked its interior, which wouldn't need much fixing up. After a long day, they both praised each other for a job well done. The girl was filled with anticipation for the future. Afterward, they decided to take a walk down the street to discuss their next steps. The prince noted her sharp intuition and asked if she was in business. Yuri blushed, still not knowing how to handle such compliments. Enoch pointed out that it was getting late and offered to walk her home. Yuri tried to refuse, saying the streets were well lit. She added that she had a magical artifact to protect herself from any trouble. The prince smiled and asked her to save the artifact for a real emergency. Yuri didn't want a knight escorting her, as her father and family might find out about their meeting. She was in a cold sweat, worried her business would be shut down, which was why she was keeping a low profile. In the end, she put away the artifact, feeling she had to protect it. She asked the prince to walk with her for a bit so she wouldn't have to go alone. A little while later, the girl finally returned home, where her mom was waiting for her. She apologized for coming back so late. Yuri explained with a blush that the crown prince had escorted her to the end of the street. The woman watched him leave, thinking he must be an upright man. Yuri immediately agreed with her, saying he was a good person. While chatting, she told her mom they had successfully found the building they needed. The woman smiled, saying they both did a great job. Yuri was excited, saying she had come up with a brilliant new product while they were talking. She was ready to dive right in and start making it as soon as she got home. Yuri finally realized this was the first time she was doing something she truly loved. Meanwhile, the prince also returned home and went to see Vivian. Now, his sister greeted him with a bright smile and had become quite talkative. She immediately started questioning her brother about whether they had found a place for the boutique. Vivian poured some tea, saying that Miss Primrose was very insightful. Enoch grinned when she admitted she had thought Yuri would be a pushover. She did seem timid, but the prince felt it was because she had always been suppressed and rejected. Her whole life had been like that. However, once they started talking about business, she changed completely. Just like that, she became a confident negotiator, completely in control of the situation. Her intuition and skills were so outstanding, he could hardly believe it. After some thought, he said there was no need to worry about Yuri. Prince Enoch chimed in, saying she was simply incredible. He immediately recalled the scene of their farewell, planning to meet at their boutique's office. Once she started doing what she loved, all her shyness and insecurity vanished. The crown prince had never met someone so vibrant and unique. Vivian pressed on, asking who exactly he was thinking of. Today, he had seen the real Yuri Primrose, a side that not even her own family had seen. He stood up, thinking how much he longed to discover every side of her. The next day, the knights were back to their brutal training. One of them called a halt, saying they had a visitor. They all immediately thought it was Lillica coming to see him, but they were dead wrong. When the knights saw Yuri Primrose, they were all stunned and completely lost their enthusiasm. They shot her disdainful looks, as they were sure there had to be a catch. Yuri wasn't intimidated, though she knew they wouldn't roll out the red carpet for her. Nevertheless, she was confident she could turn the tables and change their minds. The Primrose Knight Order was famous throughout the Empire, and only the best of the best could join. But the Order's greatest fame came from the Duke's child, who was blessed with a special gift. The instructor always boasted about how he had won 5 competitions in a row. Jixin's monstrous strength had manifested early on, even when he was just a child. All the boys his age were in awe of him and began to train like mad. But it wasn't long before everyone's illusions about Jixin were shattered. Their admiration began to fade quickly when he started making fun of them directly. He would mock them, saying they couldn't even come close to his level. They were furious that he lays around all day, doing nothing but making sarcastic remarks at them. Over time, the knights' frustration grew, and so did their hatred for Jixin. One day, Lillica came to the training grounds to visit her brother. She was the only one who was genuinely kind to the commoners. A single smile from her could disarm them and erase all their negative feelings. As time went on, the summer training became more and more arduous and brutal. They were angry that they couldn't get a doctor when they needed one. They stared at Jixin's smug face, feeling their skin burn as if on fire. Unlike the regular knights, his skin was radiant, as if he ran to a priest after every training session. Eventually, one of the knights finally snapped and decided to use Yuri's stuff. The other knights tried to stop him, saying it might be poisonous. They were convinced that the vicious woman had given them some real junk. The knight paid them no mind and applied the stuff to his arm, saying he didn't care at all. Meanwhile, a few days later, Lillica finally decided to leave her room. She found Jira to be quiet, even though she was usually a chatterbox. Lillica decided to break the ice and suggested they go look at new dresses together. Jira replied coolly that she would go with her if she wanted to. She used to love shopping and thanked her for everything, but now she was just silent. She couldn't help but wonder if Jira was holding a grudge against her because of what she had said. Lillica was angry that she dared to change her attitude over a small comment. She knew Jira could influence others, so she decided to get back in her good graces. Lillica remembered the maid used to always gaze at the knights. She decided to help the maid liven up for the next time she saw the knights. Lillica smiled sweetly and offered to introduce them. Jira perked up as soon as she heard someone was asking about her. Lillica snickered, realizing this was easier than she thought. As soon as they arrived at the training grounds, they noticed a commotion. The knights were practically begging Yuri to tell them where she got that stuff. They sincerely thanked her for making their lives so much easier. What truly shocked Lillica was that Jira actually rushed over to her sister. Yuri introduced the maid to the knights, saying she had been a great help. She kept a smile on her face until she caught a glimpse of Lillica's jealous face. Lillica felt the heavy blow of defeat and hastily hid in a storage room. The girl leaned against the wall, barely able to stand, unable to believe that even the knights had betrayed her. She trembled with rage, realizing everyone's opinion of her had changed. Lillica clutched her head, trying to figure out how to salvage everything. Jixin suddenly appeared before her, asking what was wrong. He thought she had heat stroke and decided to help her back to her room. Lillica was glad she still had someone on her side. She squeezed out a dramatic tear and spoke to him in a trembling voice. Lillica broke down, fabricating a new reason to blame Yuri. Meanwhile, the knights couldn't stop praising her cosmetics. She asked if there were any side effects, completely forgetting she had made the stuff herself. The knight rolled up his sleeve and said the effect was even better than a priest's healing. Yuri concluded that even the swelling from the sunburn on his arm had subsided. The knights raved about how quickly the burning sensation disappeared. They thought it was some kind of miracle sent from the heavens. He asked what they had done to deserve such an incredible gift. Yuri admitted that she needed to be more attentive and caring to those around her. She agreed that her previous behavior was inappropriate and promised to take good care of the duchy. The girl added that she would visit them more often to see how they were doing. One of the knights asked her to keep supplying them with that stuff. Yuri replied that she had something else for them and had a basket brought over. She showed them a tube of something, saying it was sunscreen. The guys were stunned that she had made something so precious for them. Their little paradise lasted until Jixin showed up. He demanded to know what Yuri was doing hanging around the training grounds. He got even angrier when she wished him a good morning. Jixin pointed out that she had never been here before. Yuri said she wanted to thank the knights in her own way. He told her she had no right to meddle in everything and do as she pleased. He was confused when he saw her carrying that strange basket. Jixin snatched the basket of cosmetics and asked what on earth she was doing bringing this here. She told him to give it back, saying it was for the knights. Jixin finally understood why the red marks on their bodies had disappeared. He started accusing her of getting her hands on something improper. Jixin erupted, demanding to know how she could hide something like this from him. Yuri retorted that he already had his priests and didn't need this stuff. The knights immediately called him out, asking why he was being so harsh to his own sister. They accused him, saying he didn't care about them, yet dared to yell at Yuri. He glared at them contemptuously, saying they had sold themselves out for a bit of cosmetics. Jixin turned to Yuri, telling her to get a grip and not get too carried away. He took a step closer, saying her high and mighty attitude wasn't winning her any fans. Yuri lowered her head, listening as he told her to listen to her brother for once. He smirked, saying he was going to take the basket of goodies. The knights immediately felt sorry for Yuri, realizing how upset she was. They tried to ask how she was, but she felt there was some truth to what her brother had said. The girl wiped away her tears, admitting her actions might have seemed a bit strange. She forced a smile and promised to bring them more cream later. Afterward, she left, leaving them to their thoughts. Yuri ran back to her room as fast as she could, telling them to leave her alone. She collapsed onto her bed in exhaustion, burying her face in her pillow. The girl smiled, thrilled with her luck today. She decided to take advantage of the fact that her brother's words had stirred up their chivalry. A plan formed in her mind, but she needed her mom's help to pull it off. A few days later, she decided to chat with the lady over tea. Her mom immediately noticed the bruises she had from staying up all night working. The girl thanked her for helping her with her plan. She was ready to proudly show off the cosmetics she had worked so hard to create. The butler interrupted them, saying everything was ready. The servants were stunned by the huge transformation of the dilapidated building. They were amazed at how great the place looked. It turned out Yuri had created a rest area for all the staff of the duchy. She also left a letter telling them they could use the building whenever they wanted. Jira held her breath and suggested they go inside quickly. As soon as they walked in, everything the staff had hoped for was there. Lady Yuri had prepared an entire house for them, complete with a great living room. The maids plopped down on the sofa, stunned by how soft it was. Best of all, Yuri had left several bottles of beauty products for them on the table. The girl greeted the staff, explaining it was a special gel patch for sore muscles. It had a cooling effect that really soothed the pain. She greeted them with a smile, asking if they liked everything she had prepared. The girl had also prepared hand cream for them to soften their skin. Yuri told them to make themselves at home and let her know if they needed anything. They sincerely thanked her for everything she had done for them. The staff was incredibly excited about all the goodies she had brought. In this way, she smoothed over relations and got a feel for the preferences of potential buyers. Most importantly, she helped Jira and that night get closer. They really started talking about all sorts of topics, even including the sister. Jira casually mentioned how surprised the knights were to see Lillica so angry. They started discussing the whole flower pot incident, completely unaware that she was eavesdropping. The knight had no idea Lillica had played such a dirty trick. The maids and knights never used to interact, but now they were always chatting. Lillica returned to her room, realizing her situation was getting worse and worse. She trashed her room, mentally cursing Jixon for being so useless. She had thought he would come up with a plan, but he just threw a tantrum. Lillica knew it was now more impossible than ever for her to sway anyone's opinion. A sense of dread washed over her when she heard the Duke was home. Thinking of the gifts, Lillica rushed out of her room. Dad always brought gifts for her and Jixon whenever he returned from a trip. She remembered how Yuri used to get upset as a child because she couldn't keep the gifts forever. The man didn't understand her feelings and thought she was ungrateful. Lillica told herself that as long as she had the support of the head of the family, she didn't care about the servants. Considering how displeased he was, she was afraid she might become insignificant to him. The girl believed his gift would prove that she was the most favored child. Lillica rushed to the main hall and hid behind a door. She saw the man agree to have a drink and asked him to call for Lillica. The girl was thrilled when she saw him take out the precious little box. She slowly approached him and asked how his trip was. The man handed her the gift and told her to open it. The girl thanked him for thinking of her and finally opened the box she had been waiting for. Lillica was stunned by the new, ultra-expensive trinket he had brought back from his trip. She was about to show it off when she heard her sister's footsteps. Yuri smiled and complimented the jewelry, saying it looked good on her. It turned out their father had also called Yuri down. The butler had told him that she was building a recreation area for the staff. She thought he would scold her, but he was actually impressed. He was pleased that she was finally starting to take on the responsibilities of a duke's child. Not only did he praise her, but he even decided to give her a gift. Yuri sincerely thanked her father and received a box of her own. She definitely hadn't expected her strict father to give her something so precious. Her eyes widened when she saw the incredible gift in her hands. It was an ultra-rare gem called the Brilliant Ruby. The girl thanked her father and hurried back to her office. She felt strange because, in the original story, Lillica was supposed to get that stone. Yuri hadn't even bothered to win the favor of her fickle father. In the original story, Lillica awakened healing powers. On top of that, she got a lot of help from the male leads who were completely loyal to her. One of them risked his life more than once to keep Lillica safe. Syrian wasn't just a brave knight. He also controlled elf magic. With his help, Yuri could enhance her own powers and grow more plants. According to the story, Syrian was supposed to appear around now. So she secretly went to an auction, hoping to find him as soon as possible. No one would have guessed that this ordinary-looking shop was running a slave auction. In the original story, Syrian was sold to a wealthy nobleman. Yuri wore a very strange wig as a disguise. A large man stopped her at the entrance, saying it was open to invitees only. She just silently handed him a note, and he waved her in. Once inside, she looked around, completely lost. She decided to trust her instincts and follow the sounds coming from the distance. Yuri walked down a staircase and found light coming from one of the rooms. She never would have thought that door led to such a huge hall. They gave her a number paddle at the entrance and told her to find a seat. The nobles had just settled in and were already deep in discussion about various things. They talked about people as if they were resources for the elite. She silently prayed that Syrian would be among them. The auctioneer walked onto the stage and announced the start of the auction. Immediately after, they brought a teenage boy onto the stage. A nobleman immediately bought him for 1,000,000 galleons. Yuri tried to suppress the disgust churning inside her. She watched as the auction proceeded. The auctioneer announced they were about to end the first part of the auction. He dramatically told them there was a rare item that couldn't be found anywhere else. They brought out a well-built young man who could become a top-tier mercenary. Yuri held her breath as they announced the abilities he possessed. The noble's jaws dropped in surprise when they saw his unusual eyes. The host agreed, announcing they were bidding on a half-human slave. Syrian stood on the stage, looking at all the nobles as if they were trash. Yuri realized the person before her was Syrian, and she couldn't let him get away. Dozens of nobles raised their bidding paddles at the same time. They bid on him over and over again, with ridiculously high amounts. The auctioneer dramatically paused at 8.5 million. Everyone thought it was the final offer until Yuri raised her paddle. A commotion erupted when she announced a bid of 10 million. The slave looked at her, as if trying to figure out her intentions. One of the nobles cursed under his breath and bid 12 million. They started a bidding war for Syrian, but she ended it when she called out 16 million. The host immediately repeated her bid and asked if anyone else wanted to join in. Everyone applauded when he announced the slave was sold. The whole process was so intense that her hands were shaking. Despite this small victory, she knew this was just the beginning. She glanced at the man who looked like he hated everything and remembered that he had tried to escape. Yuri was already formulating a plan in her head to prevent him from running away. They headed to the office to hand over the cash to the auction organizers. Syrian sized her up, guessing she was from some wealthy noble family. He was surprised she hadn't brought any guards, but all he could think about was escaping. He was caught off guard when Yuri spoke to him sharply. It was as if she had read his mind, telling him he should get rid of any thoughts of escaping. She knew immediately that he was planning to use magic to break free. He took a step forward, admitting she had hit the nail on the head. Syrian tried to intimidate her into disappearing from his sight immediately. Yuri said that even if he could overpower her, the guards would still stop him. She surprised him by saying she understood why he was so desperate to escape. Yuri took a deep breath and offered him a deal. She touched his chest and said she was willing to get his younger brother out of there. She knew Florence would be auctioned off in the second half. The girl mentioned that if he did this, he would be handsomely rewarded. She gave him a proposal. He would have to help her for the next 3 years. He said he didn't understand her true purpose or why she was trying so hard to persuade him. Yuri explained that she needed a helper, not a mindless puppet. She added with a smile that he could back out at any time if things got too difficult. Syrian was silent. He seemed to be judging whether he could trust her. In the end, he agreed, and Yuri kept her part of the bargain. He was finally able to meet Florence, who was also at the auction. They hugged, thrilled that they could really stay together. Yuri urged them to hurry, saying they didn't have all day. Afterward, they got into a carriage, and Yuri told them to hold out their hands. She used a magic spell to make their shackles disappear. Florence thought that since this girl had freed them, she couldn't be a bad person. Yuri, realizing they hadn't introduced themselves, took off her wig. She smiled and reiterated that she was granting them freedom in exchange for good cooperation. Syrian frowned, saying this woman, like other nobles, couldn't be trusted at all. He believed that no decent person would have anything to do with an auction like this. He added that she might end up treating them worse than their previous master. Yuri agreed and told them not to think she was doing charity. She mysteriously declared that from now on, they would face unimaginable challenges. They looked at the girl, frozen in fear, not knowing what she would do next. Syrian said that as long as she kept her promise, she could do whatever she wanted. Yuri swore on her family's honor that she would keep her word. As soon as they arrived at the palace, she swore on her own honor. Florence was stunned when Yuri led them into a huge room. They had never seen such a spacious and magnificent bedroom. She told them where to find food and suggested they get a good rest, saying they would talk tomorrow. Florence was overjoyed when he saw they even had a bathroom. What excited him even more was that fresh food had also been prepared for them. They used to sleep on piles of straw, but now they could finally experience what a bed felt like. His younger brother was genuinely happy to be taken in by such a kind lady. Syrian, however, remained wary. Although he was happy to see Florence's smile, he was convinced that she would show her true colors sooner or later. The next morning, Yuri woke them up as if they were in a military barracks. She threw open the curtains and announced that their training would begin today. Yuri announced that starting tomorrow, they would have to get up at 5 in the morning. Seeing their displeased expressions, the girls said she was going to teach them to train in spirit magic. They possessed the bloodline of a people who could control spirits, but they couldn't harness it yet. In the original story, their powers awakened when Lillica was in danger. Yuri urged them over and over to focus on the task at hand. She told them to use their power to make a seed sprout. Syrian told her not to be so rough with his younger brother. Yuri immediately retorted that his brother was doing much better than him. She added that she didn't much enjoy playing the role of a strict instructor herself. The woman ordered them to concentrate and said they would train for 3 hours every day. Eventually, she succeeded in making them complete the task. They were furious when she slammed 2 plates of salad down in front of them. Syrian was furious because even their old master would give them meat to eat. She explained that a clean diet was important for improving spirit magic. She also added that Florence could eat meat because he was still a child. Syrian was very annoyed that his brother had sold him out for a meal. After lunch, endurance training awaited them. They were about to explode with anger when they found out she wanted them to run 3 laps. She said this training regimen was designed by the Knight Commander himself. After the training, she promised to let them rest, but then dragged them to the library. She began to boast that they could enrich their minds. Syrian was horrified, saying he could never read that many books in his lifetime. Yuri let him choose whether to study first or train first. The brothers exchanged a nervous glance, but came to different conclusions. Eventually, their studies began to pay off. The girl was pleased with the progress each of the brothers had made. She pointed out Syrian's mistake and told him he needed to run a lap around the lake. Yuri told him he needed to be better prepared. Then she ordered him to start running. Florence was surprised to find that he was faster than the last time. The girl was pleased with the type of knight Syrian was becoming. She knew they needed to start his knight training as soon as possible. This time, she would make sure he was loyal to her, not Lillica. A few weeks later, Syrian had mastered his magic to an advanced level. He controlled it like an endless torrent of power. It moved from one area to another, creating new life. Yuri couldn't believe her eyes when everything lit up like that. They were thrilled at how quickly the flowers bloomed. Yuri immediately realized they possessed considerable power. She happily announced that she had prepared a little something for them as a reward for their excellent performance. The girls smiled mysteriously, saying they would both be very surprised. Judging by their expressions, it seemed she had really managed to shock them. Standing before them was an advanced barrier magic. It was something far beyond the reach of ordinary people. She told them to step inside, saying something even cooler was waiting. The moment they stepped in, Syrian's face was filled with shock. Inside the magic circle was a completely hidden farm, completely undisturbed by prying eyes. The girl had managed to disguise a huge area as a greenhouse. Yuri admitted that she herself wasn't sure if she could successfully implement her plan. She had even met with the prince at Annette's consultation office. He looked at the list of ingredients and realized they were impossible to obtain within the empire. He asked if they could be substituted with something else, so they wouldn't have to go to another continent. That was not possible, as those ingredients were very important. She presented him with a plan she called a fusion of magic and technology. She couldn't build such a large greenhouse on her own because the technology wasn't there yet. After much thought, she decided to combine magic with their existing technology. She suggested using glass and barrier magic in the construction. The prince was visibly surprised, saying he had never thought of such a thing. In the end, he decided to create a magic circle to hide the building. He told her to step back, saying he would handle everything himself. Afterward, Yuri saw him create an entire stream of magic with just a wave of his hand. Yuri had never seen such a huge magic barrier. On top of that, they needed to constantly pour mana into it to maintain it. Yuri was genuinely in awe of the crown prince's abilities. To her surprise, he spoke of his talents so casually as if it were nothing special. The prince was the kind of person she deeply admired. He began to say that he was just helping out, and that anyone could master magic to that level. Yuri praised him, saying that any plan is worthless if it can't be realized. She added that it was completely insane, something most people couldn't even dream of. She was thrilled that he was using his skills to help her. Yuri was surprised that he was silent for a few minutes after she said that. That was how he helped her build an entire farm onto the barrier. Florence excitedly pointed out that they could grow anything here. Yuri liked his confidence and told him to get to work. She also told them to listen up, as she had an important announcement. The girl announced that Syrian would become her knight and follow her wherever she went. She also ordered Florence to plant the crops and be in charge of this place. They had absolutely no idea she would be such a cold and ruthless tyrant of a foreman. Yuri explained that she made this decision based on the qualities they had shown. She believed that with proper training, they would become the best of the best. She smiled and said that from now on, their job was to work. The girl tried to encourage them, promising help and a handsome reward. In the end, they had no choice but to follow her rules. Everyone suddenly fell silent when another man at the door asked to come in. The two lads' jaws dropped when they recognized who it was. Standing before them was the crown prince himself, Yuri's partner. She said they usually kept their partnership a secret, but she decided to introduce them anyway. Yuri smiled and pointed to Florence, the young mage who was now in charge of the greenhouse. The kid's face turned bright red when the prince personally shook his hand. Next, Yuri hurried to introduce her future knight. He didn't look thrilled by the news that another man would be escorting her. Syrian started to get agitated, saying she had told them about this too suddenly. The prince had never seen Yuri talk to someone as if they were a close friend. On top of that, he noticed that Syrian was quite handsome. Yuri approached the prince and suggested they get to know each other. After a brief chat, she offered to show him around the place in more detail. Throughout the whole thing, the prince couldn't take his eyes off the interaction between Yuri and her future knight. He felt a pang of jealousy when the man tried to brush a leaf from her hair. He actually had the nerve to say that a lady of her status shouldn't be so clumsy. The prince became even more convinced that they were very comfortable with each other. Yuri suddenly turned around and praised him for creating this place. The gentleness in her voice immediately dispelled his bad mood. He accepted Yuri's offer and decided to show them around himself. The place was astonishingly large, and the brothers couldn't agree on anything. Yuri decided it was time to show what a spirit mage could do. Syrian complained that he felt like a monkey in a circus. The brothers pointed their hands at the objects they needed to grow. The prince thought to himself that these two were as powerful as the court mages. He was very impressed with the two guys who had only just begun their training. He thought that if he could visit more often, their skills would get even better. Yuri immediately started to worry, as she knew his schedule was already packed. The prince suddenly moved closer, saying he wanted to do everything he could to help her. Yuri blushed and said that just hearing him say that meant a lot to her. She tried to bring up the situation with the transport, but his mind was elsewhere. He noticed her bangs were covering her eyes and decided to help her move them. His fingers accidentally brushed against Yuri's face. She looked very surprised. Her face turned even redder when he asked if she was afraid of him. The prince was completely captivated, saying her hair was in the way and telling her to move it. He remembered that the last time he touched her, she had also gotten flustered. Miss Yuri looked away and said it was a bit too sudden. The prince didn't understand why she was fine with the mage, but not with him. Syrian just stood there watching them like a pair of awkward teenagers. Florence tried to figure out what was going on between them, but he said he was still too young to understand. After the prince left, Yuri decided to introduce the brothers to her mom. The woman, with a warm smile, handed them a basket of cookies. She had always been very supportive of Florence and had been helping her daughter develop a new cosmetics line since that day. Both brothers trained like crazy and began to make tangible progress. One day, Florence called his brother over to show him his results. She loved seeing them grow closer instead of drifting apart. Eventually, the prince and Yuri were ready to open their shop. All the ladies were stunned when they saw the shop sign. As they expected, the grand opening was met with a long line of customers. Yuri couldn't even imagine that so many people would come to Annette's opening. At the end of the day, she concluded that all their hard work had paid off. Yuri was in her office, thoughtfully studying reports and new ideas. Her mom came in and said the line in front of the store was absolutely insane. Yuri was grateful for everything her mom had done to get the business off the ground. The woman wanted to make sure Yuri was really financially stable. Yuri said she was fine and asked for help with another matter. The girl handed her mom a letter she had received a few days ago. The woman was stunned when she saw the letter was about an upcoming celebration. Yuri immediately asked if her mom could help her with it. It turned out that Princess Vivian was returning to high society and needed a partner. A week later, they gathered at the palace to celebrate the founding of the nation. This festival was the most important in the empire, and all nobles were required to attend. During the banquet, the guests talked about business and deals. The young ladies were mostly gossiping about dresses and how charming Prince Enoch had become. He delivered that wonderful speech as if he were born to it. That guy was young, but you could already tell he was a very intelligent leader. They soon went back to gossiping, mainly complaining that Princess Vivian was not in attendance. They didn't know what illness had caused her to miss the National Foundation Day. The girls felt their personalities were complete opposites and wondered how on earth he managed everything. They shut their mouths. Very quickly when they heard a loud noise. The girls looked over and saw Duchess Primrose standing there. They all held their breath when she said she was going to introduce someone to them. She grinned and said they were all in for a big surprise. The next moment, a blonde woman was standing in front of them. All the ladies dropped their fans when they realized the princess was standing right there. Vivian hadn't been seen at any event since she was a child. She smiled, greeted everyone, and walked forward. She greeted everyone and said she hadn't been able to appear in public for a long time. Count Gallion bowed and asked about her health. She also mentioned that her family had high hopes for his new business. Lady Larned approached the girl and asked if she remembered her. The woman smiled kindly and said she had met her when she was just a little thing. The princess made sure everyone saw that she was not only beautiful, but also well-mannered. Two men were whispering that she was a hothouse flower. They thought this was a good opportunity to get on the royal family's good side. One guy put down his glass, planning to win her favor with sweet talk. The girl turned thoughtfully when she heard several men talking. It dawned on her that she knew she had seen them somewhere before. He asked if he could have a word with her, and then asked if she knew anything about General Lee or Ornipin. After a moment's thought, she remembered they were famous writers. The man praised her intelligence and asked if she had heard of Eason Island. Upon hearing her answer, he was thinking he could totally win her over. He suggested she invest in researching the island's plants. He even offered to share the idea with her brother, which only made her laugh. She thought to herself, how can you come looking for investment without even having a plan? The girl knew very well that they thought she was just a pretty face who knew nothing. She just smiled and said that if those herbs were valuable, someone would have already researched them. Vivian wanted to give them a piece of advice, since they were seeking the royal family support. As she expected, they immediately scurried away, giving her a clear view of Yuri. The princess praised them for the excellent reveal of Annette a few days before the celebration. Yuri was still hesitant about going. She didn't want to ruin such an important event, especially with Vivian present. The princess gently took her hand, as if to take away all her worries. She thanked her for helping her find her strength and said she wanted to return the favor. She asked her to trust her and managed to convince Yuri to come to the party. The girl walked up to the princess and offered her a drink. The annoying guys were back, asking if she really knew Yuri. They tried to remind her what kind of person Yuri was, but Vivian told them to shut up. She turned to Baron Banyard and Viscount Tryn and said their behavior was out of line. The princess promised she wouldn't forget this and took Yuri's hand. Yuri said nothing, just looking at the girl with gratitude. She was genuinely happy because it wasn't just her mom supporting her anymore. They left, leaving the men utterly confused. The Baron and the Viscount were confused about how they had become so close. Meanwhile, Lillica and her brother Jixon finally showed up at the party. The guards didn't care that they were late and waved them through. Jixon sternly held out his hand to his sister, as if she had messed something up. As soon as she was alone, she started trying to talk to people. You can imagine her surprise when she found out that people weren't exactly that enthusiastic about talking to her. They used to flock around her, but now it was as if they wanted to distance themselves from her. At past events, they had practically done everything they could to get her attention. They left her without a word and started gossiping about another girl who had appeared. Lillica stepped forward to see who they were all staring at. Her eyes widened when she finally recognized who it was. The princess was standing there, chatting casually with Yuri. They were getting along so well, like best friends. The others couldn't stop talking about the two new beauties who had appeared. They were saying all the things about Yuri Primrose that Lillica had always dreamed of hearing. The last straw for her was when the handsome crowned prince showed up. He walked straight up to Miss Yuri and asked if she was enjoying the party. Lillica felt a pang of jealousy when she saw how good they looked together. Everyone felt that Yuri was the star of the evening. After the dance, the princess and Yuri decided to get some fresh air. Vivian was completely captivated by the atmosphere. It had been a long time since she had talked so much. She looked at her brother with admiration, finally realizing how hard he worked. Yuri sincerely thanked her for everything she had done. Vivian smiled and said it wasn't just for her and Annette. First of all, she knew her brother had high hopes for Annette. She knew he had been working himself to the bone lately and was under a lot of stress. He had been busy with government affairs and business meetings. The girl said grimly that neither she nor her brother were very fond of summer. Then she smiled and told her not to worry because it would be over soon. She had intended to change the subject, but Yuri took the hint. It only took one look to see how observant Yuri was. She didn't ask why, but she worried about it as if it were her own problem. The prince suddenly appeared on the balcony out of nowhere, wondering what we were talking about. He thanked Yuri for accompanying Vivian for the evening. Yuri thanked him back, saying he had made the evening so wonderful. The prince realized that she had been avoiding eye contact with him the whole time. He kept looking at her until he noticed that she was completely relaxed when she was only with Vivian. I stopped thinking when Yuri's mom appeared on the balcony. She said she knew about their arrangement and thanked him for his help. Yuri blushed when the prince started praising her in front of everyone. He was so sincere, gushing about her so much that even her mom started to blush. The prince said that Miss Yuri was the one who truly deserved respect. With every additional compliment, Yuri felt her legs grow weak. She modestly looked away and said he was being too kind to her. It seemed she still had trouble processing her budding feelings. She thanked him back, saying he had taught her a lot as well. Afterward, they started talking, during which Yuri noticed something. She realized the prince did look more tired than usual. She decided to consult a botanical encyclopedia to find something that could help him. Yuri began to think about who could help her create something other than cosmetics. Afterward, they returned to the grand hall where the banquet was being held. The nobles were all crowding around Yuri, lusting after her now that she had suddenly become so glamorous. They were filled with regret, saying they should have made a move sooner. Lillica felt a pang of jealousy, realizing her lifelong dream was slipping away. She stormed off in a rage, cursing the girl she hated so much. She was so angry, she even broke her expensive necklace. Princess Vivian's attendance at the party drove the entire capital wild, and what's more, her comments about Annette got spread like wildfire throughout the country. As a result, customers were practically fighting in line just to buy the products. Nobles crowded the building, desperate to get their hands on even one jar of cream. Every day, a huge crowd of wealthy clients lined up outside. At one point, a lady from overseas even showed up and ordered 50 sets. And just like that, Annette became a hit even outside the empire. Yuri also made sure Syrian stuck to his night training. His instructor always praised him, saying he improved with every lesson. Yuri stepped into their training and announced that was enough for today. She handed her future knight a cold drink. The girl was glad he was working so hard. Syrian blushed, saying she herself hardly ever took a break. He didn't know that Yuri wasn't using her father's fortune. She couldn't spend money like that, nor could she tell her father about starting a business. She also let him know that only her mom knew about the business. Yuri knew she couldn't be content with the status quo. He was surprised when she hinted at expanding production. She explained that she wasn't planning to close the shop, but was thinking about creating new products. The girl had been mulling over an idea for a long time, and it had been lingering in her mind. On top of that, she had been thinking about Daniela Benaltin, who could help in this regard. In her previous life, something that happened to her had left its mark. She was shocked when a customer showed up. What's more, this stranger asked for a private meeting. Yuri felt a sense of unease as the servant left, leaving them alone. As soon as Yuri entered her study, she saw a cloaked figure. She had never seen this woman with glasses before. Yuri lived a secluded life and hadn't had a visitor in a long time, so she was completely stunned when the woman knelt down and begged for help. She was trembling with anxiety, saying it was a real emergency. Daniela Benalton said she was an alchemist and needed Yuri's power. She needed Yuri's power to save other people. Yuri knew it was no coincidence that the alchemist had visited at this time. To Yuri's surprise, she couldn't explain how she knew about her powers. She got up from the floor and said she desperately needed the herbs now. She handed over a note, saying that Yuri's power could help them grow. The girl was completely stunned when she read what was on the paper. They both knew that growing these herbs was strictly forbidden. Daniela admitted that she was risking her life by coming to her for help. Pushed into a corner and unable to bear seeing others suffer, Yuri's heart softened in the end, and she agreed to do her this favor. She agreed to meet again, but didn't live to see that day. Even after being reborn, Yuri still remembered their promise. She thoughtfully wrote the words Philosopher's Stone on a piece of paper. It was what she wanted to create. In theory, it could turn stone into gold, heal injuries and illnesses, and was the ultimate creation of alchemists because it could grant eternal life. Yuri couldn't help but imagine a future where they no longer had to rely on priests. She was curious as to why Daniela was so certain, and after taking a sip of her drink, she bid Syrian farewell. Yuri grabbed the basket and told him to be fully prepared. The knight followed behind her, asking where she was going in such a hurry. The girl suddenly grinned and said that money wouldn't spend itself. She decided to head to the most prosperous street in the entire empire. Yuri guessed she could probably find the girl in a tavern down some alley, a girl who held a secret most people couldn't even imagine. While ordinary people were drinking beer in the tavern, a secret society was meeting here. They gathered around the same table every time, trying to unearth secrets. The alchemists were all hiding in the basement of the Alchemist Guild, the first place they could truly breathe a sigh of relief. One of the members grinned and announced he had big news. He hinted that his health was poor and he was considering finding a successor. The man declared he was going to introduce them to their future leader. When the alchemists heard that a noble was going to lead the guild, they were all furious. Seeing their hostility, Syrian became nervous and suggested she leave. The girl understood why they didn't want an outsider to lead them. They started saying she would just use them and then kick them to the curb. Alchemists were once highly respected, and many nobles supported their research. At first they tried to practice alchemy, but eventually became scientists. Until one day, an alchemist broke a flask and everything changed. He said he was fine, not injured, but everyone was still skeptical. He smelled a strange odor while mixing those things. That guy successfully concocted a strange substance that could eliminate all pain. They wanted to invent an anesthetic for the common people who couldn't afford treatment from priests. The alchemists took to the streets, inviting people to try their stuff. The commoners were stunned. They truly couldn't feel any pain. This discovery caused a huge sensation, bringing hope for the arrival of a new era. Unfortunately, some people were not happy to see things develop this way. A few days later, the priests began to proclaim that the alchemists were in league with the devil. The devout believers believed them, thinking that such power could not be righteous. From that moment on, they began to hunt down and persecute anyone who tried to do good. In the end, the alchemists were forced to go underground just to survive. The guild leader tried to explain that Yuri Primrose was actually very good to them. Despite all that had happened, she genuinely respected their spirit of dedicating their lives to their cause. She decided to start by talking about how she almost lost her mother a few months ago. Someone who had somehow infiltrated her home tried to kill her by tampering with her food. In order to help others, she had to deal with herbs often, so she hinted that she had also started to dabble in alchemy. She decided to explain everything and had them look where she was pointing. The next second, the flower pot she was pointing at began to glow with a green light. The scene before them left those people dumbfounded. They watched as a flower that had never been cared for bloomed. Yuri said she had a special gift that allowed her to make any plant bloom. They had heard before that members of the Primrose family possessed special abilities. Yuri added that with her help, they could get the plants they needed. She was also ready to show them what she had brought. She won them over, telling them they no longer had to worry about their next paycheck. They saw the suitcase before them was filled with overflowing gold coins. Yuri promised to provide all the necessary materials for their experiments, plus financial support. She smiled and said they could finally devote themselves entirely to science. As soon as she finished speaking, The men all agreed without a doubt. They also made fun of the guys who had given her a hard time at first. In the end, they happily welcomed their new boss and her second-in-command. Yuri smiled calmly, noticing a strange person. This woman was hunched over her notes, lurking silently in a corner. She kept staring at Yuri, but didn't say a word. The woman sat, celebrating inwardly that she could finally complete the Philosopher's Stone. The next day, Yuri returned to the unit company to handle business. She knew they needed to prepare for the autumn collection and already had some ideas. She decided to focus on moisturizing and exfoliating skincare products. Yuri also thanked the prince for building her greenhouse. The words slipped out, making her blush. The prince pointed out that she had been working too hard lately. She had been developing different products and frequently attending the alchemist meetings. The girl admitted that such a schedule made it impossible for her to sleep. The prince didn't know how to persuade her, as he could see she was exhausted. His heart clenched, knowing she probably wouldn't open up to him. Yuri watched thoughtfully as he held his head in exhaustion. She suggested they call a night and took something out of her basket. She handed him the box and asked him to try it. Yuri said she had developed a room fragrance to help him relax. She added that it was completely safe and had a calming effect. The man stared at the box, pondering her words. After a short pause, he smiled and told her he was willing to trust her. That very night, the servants once again watched the prince work until dawn. Every summer, he barely slept, working like a machine. He was tied to his desk for hours, buried in all the documents. They had even thought of asking Princess Vivian to intervene, but she was away at a conference. The moment the prince looked up, they scattered like cockroaches. The prince sighed wearily, feeling guilty for making everyone suffer along with him. He put down his pen and finally admitted to himself that he really had a problem. Enoch wished he could pretend to be asleep to put them at ease. He slowly looked up at the chandelier, cursing the entire summer. The crown prince tried to numb himself with work to escape his dark thoughts. The moment he closed his eyes, he could hear that damned sound of rain again. Something that was once so familiar now felt so distant. Every time he turned around, he would see his dead mother. It was as if she was calling out to him, and he had to slam his fist on the table to snap out of it. He felt like he was falling into a black hole, struggling to climb out. Trying to sleep only brought back that tragic nightmare. He could almost smell the same scent from the day of the disaster. At that thought, he remembered the thing someone had given him. He picked up the bottle as if it were his last chance to get through this. He remembered the scent was supposed to help him relax, so he sprayed it once. The next moment, a pleasant lavender scent filled the room. He really liked the scent. It immediately helped him stop his racing thoughts. Enoch smiled gratefully, feeling much calmer. He closed his eyes, feeling as if he were wrapped in a warm embrace. He was having a pleasant dream until Vivian woke him up. She hadn't seen him asleep in a long time and thought he had passed out. Vivian had decided to come home early because she was worried about his condition. He could never sleep on rainy days before, but now he was sleeping like a log. The prince said it was all thanks to the spray Yuri had given him. Vivian took a breath and recognized the scent of lavender in the air, Enoch's favorite. He grinned and took out the bottle Yuri had asked him to try. Vivian smiled, noticing the delicate little box. She found it suspicious that the girl would put so much effort into the packaging for something that just needed a quick test. Most importantly, she had also chosen his favorite scent. It seemed Vivian finally understood the real reason she did all this. She laughed and said that Yuri didn't just randomly pick that scent. Enoch blushed when she confidently added that Yuri had made the fragrance especially for him. A month had passed since their discovery, and it was time to submit a report to the guild. They also planned to launch a charity event for expectant mothers. Enoch praised her for the brilliant idea, noting how thoughtful she was. Yuri blushed and said awkwardly that he was giving her too much credit. She said she wanted to promote the idea through a charitable foundation. The guild representative suggested we contact Baron Policius's foundation. He said that foundation helps women and suggested we end the meeting. They also talked about how the temple had been withholding donations meant for the foundation. We can't just barge into the temple and start an investigation. Yuri stopped thinking when the prince asked about her plans for the evening. She blushed when he suggested they go to a restaurant for dinner together. She whispered that she'd have to take off her hood, but she didn't want to be recognized. The prince surprised her by saying it would just be the two of them for dinner. In the end, Yuri couldn't refuse the prince's invitation. On the way to the restaurant, she felt so awkward that she even regretted agreeing. It seemed she still couldn't grasp the fact that the prince was interested in her. She glanced again at his ridiculously handsome face and finally understood why she couldn't refuse. He felt her gaze and wondered what she was looking at. Yuri awkwardly avoided the question, and then they arrived at the restaurant. The crown prince gentlemanly opened the door for her and gestured for her to go inside. She was completely stunned as she looked at the people around her. She noticed the restaurant was filled with couples on dates. This small detail made her blush and her heart race, flustering her even more. The prince smiled kindly and said he had booked a private room. He led her into the room and instructed the waiter to knock before serving the food. They sat down at the table and decided to have a drink. Yuri smiled and pulled down her hood, saying the place was lovely. The prince agreed with her, glad that she liked it. He confessed that he wanted to thank her for the fragrance. Enoch said he finally had a good night's sleep and felt that the scent was as if it were tailor-made for him. Yuri immediately started talking about how they should do more research. The prince laughed when she suggested trying other scents as well. He blushed and said he had been thinking about his sister's words all night. Enoch repeated her line about how only he would like that scent. After thinking for a moment, he realized she really had made the fragrance especially for him. Yuri tried to cover it up, saying she had just chosen the lavender scent on a hunch. It wasn't until the end that she realized she actually wanted to please him. The girl tried to console herself that he was just the first person to be nice to her. She refused to believe she could actually attract him. Yuri breathed a sigh of relief when the waiter entered the room. He immediately began placing exquisite dishes on the pristine white table. Yuri tried to hide her embarrassment and asked if she could ask him a question. She wanted to know more about his sleep problems so she could help him. The prince looked away thoughtfully and blushed, as if her words had touched him. He asked if she remembered what they had overheard before they left. She remembered something about the temple embezzling donations. The crown prince mentioned that a priest had recently visited the palace. He had wanted to avoid the topic because it could be risky to talk about, but he trusted Yuri and decided to tell her something that happened with the church. Enoch asked her what she had heard about the Yavafin church. She didn't know much about the church, but her mother went there often. The organization's activities were closely related to the peace and order of the empire. The Yavafin church indeed held immense power in the empire. It was the most powerful religious group in the Piast Empire. The church's influence was so strong that it could even rival the imperial family. Their sermons attracted large crowds, especially among the wealthiest upper class. Even commoners suffering from all sorts of ailments would come to them. Usually, they were only allowed in during major festivals. At first glance, the Yavafin church seemed no different from other religions. However, they frequently solicited donations in the name of divine grace. The nobles would immediately rise and offer their wealth. They brought huge sums of cash just to make a contribution. Sometimes they would show up with ridiculous problems, like worrying about wrinkles. A priest would touch her face and pray for God to bless Lady Bonaria. The woman would immediately declare she felt 5 years younger. The church was more like a group of scammers, using divine power for their own gain. They constantly sent priests to the front lines to heal the troops, and for every single treatment, they demanded cash from everyone. The royal family was being ripped off, paying a high price to save the soldiers' lives. A few weeks ago, the archbishop himself came to the palace. Count Conrad explained that he was just temporarily acting as the official for the region. The priest sat down in a chair on his own accord, and just like that, gave the official a blessing. This archbishop, Severino, looked like a decent man, but believe me, looks can be deceiving. He claimed that since the last negotiation, the priests had been healing the soldiers. After the count said they were grateful for the church's help, he smiled smugly. After that, he began to seriously doubt whether they were truly appreciated. He implied that the priests were having a hard time being around the soldiers. The priest made an exaggerated gesture and said they should cherish the priests more. Count Conrad was furious because they had already increased their pay. Severino asked him if he really thought harnessing divine power was that easy. He added that because of the war, the common people had to wait for months to get help. Now, the Count understood why the troops had been complaining about their treatment recently. Severino suggested a slight adjustment to the payment system, having them pay for the entire time the priests were away. He added that they had been successfully treating the soldiers' wounds for some time now. The priest handed the Count a new contract, and the Count's eyes widened. Severino implied that if we refused, they would no longer be able to send priests over. So they were using their service to God to line their own pockets. Severino stood up and said that the prosperity of the temple would please their Lord. He promised to give us time to consider and hoped we would see reason. We were supposed to protect the army and the common people, but these demands made me uneasy. I knew that if we agreed, the church's appetite would only grow. What scared the crown prince was that he didn't even know what to do about it. Yuri finally decided to reveal that she had been funding a group of alchemists during her research. She had been thinking about how to advance medicine. It was then that she remembered the painkillers banned by the church. Soon after, they successfully developed some pain-relieving pills. The prince knew how dangerous it was to get involved with alchemists. Yuri Primrose weighed all the risks, but she couldn't pass up this opportunity. She smiled and said that their world desperately needed a major change. She admitted that she planned to keep it a secret until they had a real breakthrough. Yuri added that for now, he was the only one who knew. The prince suddenly said he wanted to go see this guild. That very night, he summoned one of his men. At first, the count thought he was being summoned because of the negotiations with the priests. The prince agreed, saying that was indeed part of the reason. He insisted on postponing the negotiations for a few months, no matter what. Looking at the crown prince, the count couldn't help but feel he already had a plan. He mysteriously declared that today he had found a glimmer of hope that would show the way. This light would guide the empire, which was mired in darkness. That very night, Yuri decided to keep her promise and secretly take him into the guild. It turned out she had even bought an entire building and disguised it as a tea house. She invited him to go inside and see for himself. She approached an alchemist and exchanged some code words. They were talking about a specific tea that helps with headaches. The girl took a sip, and a look of pure delight appeared on her face. Yuri explained that they were testing new pills made from ginger and mulberry. After that, she decided to show him the Alchemist Guild's laboratory. She provided the researchers with everything they could possibly need. Over time, they had accumulated a wealth of ideas and theories that could be put into practice. She had them talk about the cough medicine they were developing. It was a mixture made from magnolia buds and the stems of other flowers. Another person immediately noticed his airways felt much better. Yuri excitedly pointed out that the development of this medicine was in full swing. She introduced them to her friend, who was very interested in the possibilities of alchemy. The alchemist immediately perked up and offered him the chance to invest in their projects. They gave me a detailed presentation on the completion of a new series of medicines. Yuri told them to calm down, saying she would explain everything. Afterward, she pulled the prince aside and showed him their research plan. She was considering investing part of Unit's profits into drug research. The prince said it was a good idea and asked how she planned to make money. Yuri replied that she already had a plan in case the church interfered. She planned to use Unit to sell an ointment to be applied to wounds. Unit was already well established in the empire, making it difficult for the church to come after us. She smiled and said that even if things got tough, she wouldn't back down. The prince was surprised when she said they should do everything they can to help people. Enoch smiled slyly and said he really couldn't resist her. Yuri blushed upon hearing him say she had exceeded all expectations. He reminded her again that this gamble could cost her everything, even though she might change the world forever. Even knowing this, he still wanted to help her at all costs. He promised to risk everything to support the Alchemist Guild. Yuri was thrilled and asked for his guidance. Then they shook hands solemnly, sealing the deal. Enoch smiled, realizing her warmth was rubbing off on him. Suddenly, a memory surfaced starting from that funeral. He remembered again how Vivian had changed because of her. Not only that, but she had also managed to illuminate the darkness and pain in his soul. He smiled, remembering how he had sworn then and there to protect her smile. No matter the situation, she had the power to lead him out of the darkness. Meanwhile, at the Yavafin church, the atmosphere had grown tense. Severino was berating the priests for bringing in too little money. It turned out they hadn't even managed to extort half the required amount. They tried to justify their failure, saying many nobles had joined Unit. Not only was no one buying their services, but Count Conrad also hadn't sent the money yet. Severino ordered them to find out everything about this company and report back. A short while later, a priest told him that a lady wanted to see him. She was sitting in the church, complaining about this endless headache. Lillica felt terrible, holding her head in her hands. The splitting headache made it impossible for her to even think straight. Just recently, she had been invited to visit Count Norad's estate. The ladies were all buzzing about the new products at the Unit store. On top of that, the whole town was talking about the charity event for expectant mothers. Lillica wasn't really part of that conversation. She used to be the center of attention at every ball, but now no one even noticed her. She could only attend this boring party because she wasn't invited anywhere else. The girl zoned out again, trying to figure out how she had fallen so low. She was furious that everyone was treating her so disrespectfully. Besides being ignored, the women also started giving her a hard time. One of the girls asked if she had gotten the new limited edition cream. Her fiancé had mentioned that her brother, Jixon, always got the new products first. Lillica weakly argued that she didn't have any skin problems. The ladies found it strange that Yuri hadn't saved a single bottle for her. One of the girls pulled up a chair and asked her to help get a few bottles. They had heard the Countess was close with the company's founder. Lillica knew this was a pipe dream, as they weren't even on speaking terms anymore. She used to pretend to be a good mother, but now they weren't even talking. The ladies laughed, gossiping about the bouquet incident involving Lily. They tried to put her down, saying that now even the Countess couldn't help her. Lily suddenly stood up, slammed her hand on the table, and shut them up. She asked if they really needed those limited edition essential oils. The girls smiled smugly and said they would have them by the next party. The next day, Yuri decided to show the servants her new things. She greeted them with a smile and asked how they were doing. The girl said she had brought them gifts that were hard to come by. She also found out that Jeffrey had taken Miss Lily to a high society party. It turned out the young ladies were asking her to bring the limited edition essential oils. Yuri remembered one of Lillica's most despicable tactics from the past. She used to always try to tie her hands and stop her from doing anything. She thanked the servant for the information and promised to bring more money. Yuri felt a twinge of pity for Lillica, knowing it would be very difficult for her to get the items. Meanwhile, the girl herself was going crazy over the upcoming party. She had no idea how to get the things they needed. She used to be able to ask the servants for help, but now they all worked for Yuri. Even her father was out of town on a long business trip, so he couldn't be counted on. She didn't want to ask Jixon for help, knowing he would only make things worse. She had tried to meet with Yuri before, but to no avail. Her maid kept saying that Miss Yuri was too busy to see anyone. Lillica clutched the blanket tightly, knowing full well that Yuri was doing this on purpose. She cursed out loud at everyone who had forced her into this life. The girl froze, tried to even her breathing, and calm down from her anger. Then, a brilliant idea suddenly popped into her head. She was sure the ingredients of that essential oil were no different from the regular stuff. Lillica figured she could totally fool everyone by swapping the essential oil bottles. She rushed to her jewelry box, ready to carry out her plan. The girl looked over the contents of the box, thinking they should be enough to pass off as the real thing. Just then, a maid was walking down the hallway with a tray. Lillica looked around furtively and closed the door as if hiding something. The maid was very surprised and asked if she was going out. She refused to take any nights with her, saying she would be back soon. Lillica hurried away, telling her not to reveal that they had met. The next day, Yuri returned to the shop and busied herself with her own affairs. After the essential oil craze, she finally finished all her reports for the week. The girl smiled, wondering what her younger sister was doing now. She was genuinely curious how Lillica planned to find those essential oils without any servants. Her eyes widened when someone demanded to see the shop owner. A woman was shouting that their cosmetics had nearly killed her. She ran downstairs and saw Mrs. Pachura, who was threatening to have the entire shop shut down. She kept saying that all their promises about ensuring customer safety were just a load of nonsense. The lady demanded they take responsibility for everything their product had caused. Yuri examined her face closely and saw that her eyes were bloodshot, like an allergic reaction. That same day, she gathered everyone involved in production to figure out what had happened. It seemed no one around knew why they had been summoned. Mrs. Pachira claimed she had used a new, limited edition essential oil before bed. As soon as she applied it, she felt a sharp pain, and then her eyes swelled up. This incident happened just as their product was starting to become a huge hit and widely popular. They needed to get to the bottom of it and find the cause as soon as possible. Yuri was so shocked she couldn't say a word. To make matters worse, that the whole thing had happened right in front of other customers. They decided to discuss Mrs. Pachira's current condition. They looked at the doctor's report and found she only had a mild case of pink eye. One of the women immediately began to wonder if something had gone wrong during production. A second girl countered that they checked the product quality every day. She thought perhaps someone else had purchased the product, posing as Mrs. Pachira. They always communicate with customers to see if they have any history of allergies. Besides, the product was only manufactured a month ago, so it couldn't have gone bad already. There were no strange herbs in the essential oil, but it was still possible for Mrs. Pachira to have an allergic reaction. Yuri was so stressed that her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She knew how much damage this incident would do to the company's reputation. The girl was afraid it would affect Princess Vivian, the prince, Dot, and her mother. Most importantly, the blame for this whole mess could fall on the entire royal family. Yuri started to think she should never have gotten involved in the first place. The crown prince noticed her growing stress. He gently squeezed her hand, as if to show that he would support and believe in her. He smiled and said they should work together to resolve this. Yuri smiled back, realizing she had been too hasty and had let past failures cloud her judgment. The company representative thanked him for his support and said she would visit Pachira later. They shook hands and exchanged a few friendly words. They arrived at the manor that same day, wanting to inspect the item. Pachira immediately questioned if they were planning to pull some trick and cover everything up. She added that they couldn't just do as they pleased. The man placed a hand over his heart and swore on his honor that they genuinely wanted to help. He promised they would do everything in their power to make amends. Furthermore, they also promised to cover all medical expenses and provide compensation. Only after receiving these assurances did Mrs. Pachira agree to bring out the bottle of essential oil. The man immediately placed a bottle with a colorful label on the table. The company representative poured some into a bowl to inspect it. They immediately confirmed the essential oil had gone bad, which was proven by its smell and color. Pachira confirmed their findings, then started bad-mouthing their company again. The bottle looked authentic, but it was missing the serial number engraved with magic. She asked Pachira if she was sure the bottle was purchased from Unit. The representative explained that every bottle has a special mark. The packaging is easy to forge, so they added this mark as an anti-counterfeiting measure. Pachira immediately claimed they were trying to fool her with this so-called mark. The other girls suggested asking her when she bought the item. They asked for the date of purchase so they could check the records for that day. Seeing Pachira become agitated, they knew they had been tricked. The representative threatened to take the matter to the imperial court. As soon as she heard her family could lose its title over this, Pachira decided to confess. She immediately jumped up, promising to tell them everything. The woman said, blushing, that she had gotten the item from Lillica Primrose. According to her, she had gotten the essential oil directly from a representative of Unit. They couldn't believe someone of her status would push a counterfeit product. One of the representatives was furious that Lillica was the mastermind behind the whole incident. She decided she had to find out why someone that was trying to slander their company. A few days later, Lillica was calmly combing her hair and humming a tune. She was very pleased with herself for coming up with such a brilliant scheme and playing everyone for a fool. The girl smirked, thinking this was her ticket back to the top. She told herself she would be back to her high society life in no time. She was stunned when she was immediately summoned to the Duke's office. The handmaiden was in a panic, not knowing why she had been summoned so suddenly. Finally, she blurted out that the royal family was summoning her for a trial. The news hit her like a bolt from the blue. She had no idea about the conversation that had taken place at the Unit Company. 2 days earlier, they had decided to compare the bottles and found that the fake looked identical to the real one. Most importantly, they checked other products and found they had been tampered with as well. The counterfeit and the genuine essential oils had the same ingredients. People were always trying to copy Leonard's things, so he had suggested hiding the mark with magic. The prince, Dot, was shocked that Yuri's sister was the culprit. He couldn't understand why she would do such a thing. That was why Yuri wanted to speak with him alone to explain her family situation. She asked if he had heard about Lillica sending lilies to her mother. Her mother was ready to forgive Lillica and was waiting for her apology, but her sister started avoiding them. Yuri was angry and told Lillica's handmaiden to make sure she didn't go near their mother. She never thought Lillica would take things this far. The girl couldn't help but wonder if she should have stayed out of it from the beginning. The prince comforted her, saying they needed to gather evidence to show people the truth. He knew this was the only way for them to save the company's reputation. After returning home, Yuri gathered the servants to find out where Miss Lillica had been. A handmaiden said she had seen Lillica go to the tailor's shop alone. Lillica always used to take a guard or a few handmaidens with her when she went out. So, going out alone this time struck the handmaiden as very strange. Afterward, Yuri went to the tailor shop that Lillica frequented. They told her that Lillica had bought an expensive dress and had asked them to find a highly skilled artisan. The tailor gave her the address of an artisan who often supplied the shop with jewelry. Yuri visited the artisan, but he just shrugged and said no one had come by. She found this strange and suggested that Syrian apply a little pressure. In an intimidating tone, he asked the man if he was in the business of sharpening swords. He finally admitted that she had paid him to make those jars. They had never suspected the culprit would be related to Yuri. The prince insisted she should face the consequences for her misdeeds. Furthermore, he mentioned that she had invested a lot of money in Unit. He believed this incident would make Lillica reflect on her actions. Enoch announced that he would be filing a lawsuit against Miss Lillica Primrose. Just a few days later, Lillica received a harsh scolding from her father. He couldn't believe she was being sued for counterfeiting cosmetics. The man was furious, wanting to tear her apart for tarnishing the family's name. He demanded she explain why she had done such a thing in the first place. The Duchess entered the study, saying she had no idea she needed that bottle of essential oil. She called her actions unacceptable, saying she could have gotten the oil just by asking. Her father slammed his fist on the table, demanding to know what she could possibly be lacking to make her do such a thing. They all knew very well that she could get anything she wanted as long as she asked. But as long as she asked, the girl burst into tears, saying she just wanted to be friends with the other girls. She started playing the victim, saying that even her own mother didn't care about her. She tried to argue her way out of it, claiming Mrs. Pachira must have stored the essential oil improperly and was trying to frame her. Her father bought this story and said he was also partly to blame for what happened. He concluded by saying she was to meet with the royal family tomorrow. The man said that if she explained everything clearly, and showed remorse, they would forgive her. They began to comfort her, promising to do everything to protect her. Lillica smiled slyly, thanked him, and was completely unaware of what was to come. She felt her childhood was terrible, having never known her father and having lost her mother. Even so, she had received a large inheritance left by her mother. They had once lived together, but after her mother's death, she moved to her father's estate. When she saw the luxurious manor, her eyes widened in amazement. She thought such an estate only existed in princess fairy tales. After she arrived at her new home, her father and older brother welcomed her warmly. But the same could not be said for her stepmother and older sister. For a long time, she felt like a thorn in Yuri's side. After every time her sister put her down, she would calm herself by reading a book her mother had given her before she died. In that story, the heroine overcame all hardships and won the love of the crown prince. Inspired by the story, Lillica decided to take advantage of Yuri's fiery temper. By doing so, she crafted the image of a tragic heroine for herself. She was just one page away from her main goal, the handsome prince. Enoch Piast was her ideal, and she was determined to have him at any cost. All this time, she couldn't figure out why he wouldn't even spare her a glance, no matter how hard she tried. She always felt invisible. The day of the trial arrived. The prince had surprisingly agreed to visit their estate. Duke Primrose said they had invited him so that Lillica could apologize to him in person. Enoch Piast mentioned their claim about a misunderstanding and stated he was there to hear their explanation. Seeing him this close for the first time, Lillica was determined to win his heart. She put on a sorrowful expression, saying she had never intended to harm anyone. The girl dramatically wiped away her tears, saying the ladies had pressured her into getting the essential oil. She added that her mother was always busy with social events. Lillica insisted that it was Pachira who had stored improperly. She glanced guiltily at the prince, adding that she just wanted to befriend the ladies. To her surprise, the crown prince said he was deeply disappointed. He asked if she realized the gravity of her actions. The prince explained that not only would the company be affected, but the royal family would also be implicated. He considered it disrespectful to be forced to listen to her lame excuses. Enoch sneered that he had no choice but to take the matter to court. Lillica shivered, her mind burning with panic and scorn. As Enoch announced his departure, her body began to move uncontrollably. She caused quite a commotion by fainting. Duke Primrose took her in his arms and urgently ordered the butler to be summoned. The prince, also caught up in the general panic, ordered a priest to be called. The duke asked him if he was really going to press charges, despite everything his daughter was going through. The prince, that asked if she had been raised to believe she could do whatever she wanted. He added that a lady had nearly gone blind because of her little trick. Enoch declared he would not turn a blind eye to her mischief. The Duke prepared for a direct confrontation with the royal family, but the Duchess intervened. She quickly bowed her head before the Crown Prince, saying they should never have let things get this far. She called herself a terrible mother and said she was willing to take full responsibility. The Duke, trembling with anger, decided she only cared about her precious reputation. The Crown Prince understood that this woman was the only one who was truly innocent. He agreed to drop the charges if Lillica publicly apologized for her actions. After confirming the priest was on his way, Enoch Piast turned to the Duke. He made it clear to the Duke that he owed the Duchess a great debt. The Crown Prince sternly rebuked the man, saying that if the same thing happened again, he wouldn't get off so easily. The man just held his daughter tightly, thinking to himself what a difficult man this prince was. He thought the prince was just an arrogant brat who had lucked into the throne because his older brother died. He was so obsessed with his daughter that he even saw his own wife as worthless. Just then, Lillica felt that murderous aura seeming to infect her as well. After some time, the day came when Lillica had to make her public apology. The woman dragged the girl before the victim and demanded she apologize. Lillica lowered her head, feigning guilt, and mumbled that she was truly sorry. As she turned away, she heard the gossips start to whisper that she was just like her mother. They kept saying that Miss Yuri looked every bit the Duchess's daughter. Society believed that Lillica's humble origins that were the root of her terrible behavior. Lillica wanted to convulse, but she felt like she was sinking into a black hole. She looked around, begging for help, but the abyss only pulled her legs down harder. The girl saw the gloating faces of her enemies, who chanted, "What goes around, comes around." Yuri, Princess Vivian, and Prince Enoch all looked at her with contempt. This feeling of despair completely consumed her until she snapped her eyes open. She opened her eyes in a panic and saw her fingers were covered in some kind of black, viscous substance. She couldn't figure out where this disgusting substance had come from her body. The girl was convinced that someone out there must know something. Just a few hours later, at the crack of dawn, she headed to a residential area in the capital. Lillica was trying to follow a map marked with a specific alley. She snapped her head up when she heard a strange man's voice. He smirked and said she was just a little tyke the last time they met. After hearing her story, he immediately understood why she had come. He arranged a carriage for her, and at dawn, she arrived at a special place. Her situation was so desperate that she was prepared to do whatever it took. She hoped she would never have to return to the slums where her tribe was located. Not to live. She was a descendant of the Red River tribe, located on the outskirts of the Piast Empire. They were a cold and ruthless people who looked out only for themselves. Not as long as they could survive. The place was filled with dilapidated buildings that looked ready to collapse. The only thing worse than these foul-smelling slums were the people, their hearts filled with resentment. The streets on the edge of town were filled with drunks, swindlers, and prostitutes, with most women working in brothels. Her mother was no exception, and over time, she even acquired some high-society clients. This became a reason for people to make fun of Lillica and her mother. Even though she had to deal with all that, to her daughter, she was everything. Lillica needed nothing but her loving, wonderful mom. Sadly, her happiness only lasted until her mother was bedridden with a serious illness. That night, she revealed a secret to Lillica, telling her she was the daughter of a wealthy duke. After saying these words, she passed away, leaving her a small book with a note inside, detailing where she had hidden her hard-earned money. After getting the money, Lillica went straight to the tribe's chief and asked him to arrange a meeting with Duke Primrose for her. He readily agreed and began digging up dirt on the Duke. A few weeks later, they dressed her up and put her in a carriage. As a parting gift, he handed her a map and a special coin so she could find her way back. Looking at those people from a distance, she vowed to get revenge on everyone who had bullied her and her mother. She had thought she could secure a ducal title and crush everyone, but instead, she was back where she started. The girl, lost in thought, stepped out of the carriage, not knowing what the future held. After so many years, her feet once again touched the filthy soil of her good-for-nothing tribe. Compared to the locals, Lillica looked like a high-society lady who had just stepped off a magazine cover. She was completely out of place among the drunken, low-life criminals. They snickered, "Well, look who it is. The Duke's daughter has graced us with her presence." They accused her of sending knights to rough up the people they had sent to see her. One of the guys smirked, told everyone to calm down, and hinted that she had come of her own free will this time. Figuring she had come a long way, he asked what brought her here. The girl admitted that she had recently felt a strange power awakening within her. The woman sitting on the chief's lap demanded she show some respect. He chuckled and reminded her that before she left, they had told her about the Primrose family's special power. Although he called it a gift, Lillica was sure it was something else entirely. He tried to suggest she visit a mage or a priest, but she silently threw a bag of gold coins on the floor. She confidently pulled down her hood and demanded they reveal the secret to her as her rightful payment. The other thugs picked up the bag, saying it was full of real diamonds. She described feeling something dark and heavy in her chest, and then she started coughing up black mucus. Hearing this, the man immediately began to guess what kind of power was awakening inside her. He asked if she had ever felt a strong urge to harm others and cause them pain. Lillica immediately thought of the people she hated and wanted to destroy the most. The man laughed wickedly and said he understood everything now. He said it was black magic awakening within her, a power that only a very few could unlock. These words hit her mind like a massive avalanche, heralding that something terrible was about to happen.